Hey, what's going on, guys? Phil here, and we are back with podcast 211. My guest tonight is none other than Navid A1, and he is the creator of the Mechwarrior 5 Reloaded mod that all of you guys play. That also includes the 3D HUD, the revised HUD, rescale, laser improvement as well. What other? Am I missing anything?
I think, yeah, that's all. Like also inverse kinematics, but yeah, they're all included in Reloaded.
Yeah.
As a single package now. Yeah.
How you doing, man?
So, good. Thanks for having me on this podcast. I guess there's been it's been a long time we've been trying to do a podcast, but I'm glad that we're doing this now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I was wanting to have you on. It's had to have been what, at least 5 months ago, because it was about the mods. Because talking about what you were doing early on, and yeah,
it was when I was cutting sleep hours to work on Reloaded. It's oh, this doesn't work. Get back to Alex. Alex, is this gonna get added? Is this gonna get patched? We're kind of holding up on this, but yeah, that was about that time.
Well, so obviously I want to pick your mind about a few things, and obviously we've got sort of two different things right now. I think let's go and just dive into Mech 5 just for a bit, because I feel like we can just it's just not as long of a conversation, and then we can dive into Mechwarrior Online for anybody that's listening. You started getting involved with the mods pretty much right away. What's that been like for you in this entire process, and what have you what have you struggled with, but what are some things that you've overcome since you started, oh, well, now I'm better at, or is the entire process a little bit better for you now?
Back in 2017, when PGI announced that, all right, so Mechwarrior 5 is going to be moddable. We're going to support mods. It was good because at least for our generation that are not really old to have been through the tabletop days, we've played Mechwarrior 3 and Mechwarrior 4, and those games had really good modding scene in form of MechTech. Mechwarrior 3 had some really good mods, and we're oh, awesome! Mechwarrior 5 is going to support mods, and we're going to do basically everything we want to do. And specifically for me, because I was passionate for Mechwarrior Online, I was I want to change things. I want to play with these variables. I was this is awesome.
Yeah.
And so a bunch of other people, like-minded other people, were around as well, and we were all right, so after Mechwarrior 5 is released, we're gonna mod things. I don't know, at the time we were thinking about making tanks drivable and controllable. And I think during the summer of 2019, we started downloading Unreal, and kind of went ahead learning it. Basically, that was the first time I even launched Unreal Engine. It was probably August 2019, and it was well, this is great, because in my work, I'm an electrical engineer. I design electric motors and develop mathematical models for them. And these mathematical software that we use, I don't know, many might know this software, MATLAB has the same graphical user interface for developing functions, for developing basically it's a visual logic.
Okay.
It's very similar to Unreal. And I'm well, I'm right at home. This is familiar. And we went ahead, I even made kind of a tech demo of a mech, with weapons and everything,
I remember that,
animations. Yeah. And then we basically wanted to go in prepared. And the mod tools that was released,
it
there were a
created
lot
some
of things.
frustration.
Yes, the mod tools that was released, it was really good that they released the whole project file, the raw game, which meant that usually, like, for example, before Mechwarrior 5, I was making mods like for Skyrim, and they have like a prepared packaged tool that allow you to do some things, and they allow you to do some scripting as well. But the raw game project, that's something else, and it's basically the best case scenario. When they released it, although some of that was locked away behind code, like not many of the functions were not accessible, and so the approach we took to the mods kind of tied into the Mechwarrior 5 itself, because I think like we were about like 10 people. We were like, all right, so they have an MWO MechLab already implemented,
Yeah.
but it's inactive. So that's because that's was one of the things that we were going to do, because we kind of knew that Mechwarrior 5 is going for a more like lore-friendly stock mech approach to things. And we're like, okay, so this is going to be easy. So let's focus on like missions and like making other features, like making tanks drivable, that sort of thing. And when it hit and we delved into the game, it was like first the UI, like the HUD, was one of the first thing that kind of put us off. It's very minimalistic, like it's not in the way, but some of the elements in on the HUD, like we're not used to, is like, all right, the paper doll is reversed, so left is right, right is left, and like the mini map is somewhere that you need to take your eyes off. I think I believe you mentioned like most of these in like one of the earlier podcasts.
Yeah. I mean,
5 mods, yeah.
And even if it was like, I always question, well, why didn't you just use Mechwarrior Online? Because I mean, at least then, right? I mean, and we had seen previous versions of their UI that seemed to, and that's sort of where you went with your 3D HUD eventually, but like the idea of like, I think the current HUD is very stock, like widgets too. It almost seems it's this 2D plane. There's no interaction. There's no depth, field of depth, or anything that like puts you as like, you know, in this mech and the immersion and stuff like that. So yeah, like I do, and I still question whether it's the right call. I mean, obviously I asked Russ, and his response was that internally, for first and third person internally, they like this solution the best instead of making an alternative for third person. So whether or not we like the answer, that was an answer that they chose, right? So yeah,
I could understand, because like they went for the safe approach. Like the HUD that you see in Mechwarrior Online, the stock HUD, it's not something like because it looks this way, it is simple, or like they like took shortcuts in designing things. Obviously, on the technical side, there's no shortcuts. Like they have basically thought about everything as it seems, like from the files and from kind of the foundation of things. Like the only thing that is lacking is the art side of things, not the technical side. So I understand. I mean, perhaps like time was an issue. Like they were like hard pressed for like time meeting a deadline, so it's understandable. And fortunately, it was something that we could edit right out the gate. Like we went for the MechLab and saw that, all right, so there's some functions that are not accessible right now. Like back then, you couldn't set the mech speed, so speed was basically a set value. So engines was basically out of the window.
Yeah, we had to wait a few patches for that to enter updates. Yeah, so for those that may not have been involved, the initial launch of Mech 5, we had a basically they launched the editor, but the problem with it was it was more like they took the stance of like, hey, just FYI, this isn't ready really for you guys to deep dive, but at least we want you to start getting familiar with the systems, which is sort of a bummer when individuals like yourself and others are like, you're running to go 100 miles per hour and then you basically hit a wall because, you know, or you go 100 miles per hour and then they update and it erases all your work, or it changes everything and they're like, you know, and they apologize. They're like, hey guys, you know, but like, yeah, it's definitely improved over the past, 6 months. 8 months.
Yeah. I mean, like I was lucky that like I saw someone like I think Scout Derek, like was working on a Union dropship, and
Oh,
all
poor
his work
bastard.
was deleted.
Yeah.
Deleted, and kind of that was the red flag. Like I quickly like quit EGS and like started backing things up
Yeah.
and then updated things. So I was fortunate enough to not to lose anything. So at the start, so I was like, all right, so MechLab, we just leave it to see if they want to do
Yeah.
like something with Sweden. Um, and then we're like, all right, so what's the closest thing? What's the like low hanging fruit
Sure.
in this? And basically, it was the HUD
Yeah.
because that's the first thing that basically uh, in your face when you start playing the game. And the number one thing was like, all right, so I'm just losing my components because I'm shielding the wrong side. That was basically the only thing that I started delving into HUD because I just wanted to fix that thing. Like 3D HUD or like the other one, those were not the goal at the time. It was like I just want to fix this damn paper doll so I can play the game.
Sure.
And I want that like mini map down there, so it's somewhere that I'm used to. So let's do that.
Yeah.
And the initial versions of those HUD was just that. And I was like, all right, so um, perhaps they're taking the time to update the editor. So let's go like polish the HUD,
Yeah.
polish the HUD elements, and then like add stuff to it. And then I saw like on some of the Discord servers, like people were like, all right, so you remember this from 2016? Like this is
Yeah.
really cool. And I loved it. Like
Yeah.
2016 when Russ showcased that demo, I'm like, damn, this is awesome. Like
Yeah.
that's really
It's
looking
different.
good.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and me and you had literally hours long conversations about like the lack of not progress, the lack of like imagination of like what it means to be like if you're sitting in the mech, what is that I think I use the term what is that experience, what is that
Yep.
HUD experience, what is that like you put on your neuro helmet, you're interacting with your mech, what does that look like, or what is that? And that's where I do feel the UI that they came up with, the HUD, it just it was very vanilla, like you know, like and it didn't move that forward, and if anything it took a step backward, right? Because I mean, if you compare it to what they had in MWO, like you could even argue, why didn't you just use what you already had and everybody knew and was okay with that, and so forth and so on. So that's obviously, I know me and you have literally talked for hours, so
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's also a technical side of things that Unreal Engine cannot really like apply some of the post-processing effects on like 2D HUD elements. There usually needs to be created manually, like glow effects, like bloom, or like depth of field, like that sort of effect are not really applicable to like what Unreal Engine is capable of. So I could understand some of the approaches that they took to move towards a 2D
yeah,
HUD, even though like the 3D version that they had looked really good. Like there are some like problems with anti-aliasing and like transparent panels, which also have like a glow effect to them. But still, 2017, 2018, those they had working demos. I
yeah,
played both,
yeah,
both 2017 and 2018, and those were still like had some elements of art
yeah.
in them.
They're unique.
So
They had character. They were making that experience, I think, better. And I mean, that is one thing, I guess, that there will be two sides of the coin. One side of the coin is PGI should have done better, and the other side is, well, the tools are there, and you can already see what people have done, like yourself. And there's been a few other attempts too. There was the one where it was almost like a fighter pilot green line sort of HUD looking one as well. And I've said this on stream, and I've told you this, like even your 3D HUD that I think is fantastic. There are things that still throw me off because like I'm still used to seeing the enemy paper doll on the top right, and when it's not there, then it's down there, and then so it's like there are like organic elements to, like, again, the HUD that was in MWO. But even then, even with what you've done, I remember we were having conversations about, well, what are other games? What are and I think I linked you Titanfall. Like, to me,
Titanfall, yeah.
Right, like that's where, like, I think they took the idea of, you have these futuristic, war machines, you want to protect the pilot, and when it closes up the technology, then you can see on the outside. And that was a really cool idea that, oh, Bear Claw mug, nice. There you go. Yeah. Shout out to Bear Claw. But yeah, like the idea of this, being in a mech, and the concept of, it's highly sophisticated, the experience changes and stuff like that. And I remember we had those conversations as well about, like, what could be the most immersive thing, and that's where the imaginative part comes in. And I guess asking you, like, how was working on the HUD, and what were the challenges with that? I mean, obviously there's technical, but, like, what about the art side of things? Like, why do you think that called out to you?
I mean, first, the HUD that I saw, like 2016, the intuitive side of it was kind of like interesting to me, because, like, I'm an engineer and I'm like, all right, so this is simple. Like, it doesn't have like lists, weapon group, like a bunch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6s that basically are just a passive information there, and you just use them once. They're all there. They're clutter, and it's kind of like the 2016 HUD. It was like, I think it was like one of the PGI engineers, like Dave. He was saying that the initial idea was kind of from him and some others, and it was intuitive and it was really nice. I was like, well, I really like playing in something like this, because usually when I play Mechwarrior Online, when you lose a weapon, or like when you're doing something, when you have multiple weapons on your mechs, you just see something like crossed out in a list.
Yeah.
And at the time, like, you cannot really quickly get a quick information. Okay, so what happened? What did I lose? Like, is it the Gauss rifle that I lost, or is it the medium laser that I lost? So that's kind of something that I was going for that 3D HUD, like quick visual conveying an information without having to read lists. Like, for example, like there are like ammo counters, range counters, but you don't really like look at them at every shot you make. Like, okay, so you have 20 Gauss shots, you don't need to read them again, so you know you have 20. So but like the cooldowns, like changing of colors, flashing, those things can be visually like noticeable even without you looking at them. So it was like just from the layout side of thing, that was the layout was pretty much easy, because credit to PGI, it was already there.
Yeah, it was already there.
Basically the idea was there, the art was there, and the layout was there. The challenge was the technical side of things. All right, so this art thing, it has to be dynamic. It like the 3D HUD that you see is just 6 panels right in front of each other, and each of the panels are in charge of displaying some one thing. Like, one is in charge, like, and they all have different brightness, different like exposure, so that everything should be readable. Like, there's like another like panel that creates like the back, like transparent shadows. And those are all because of the technical difficulties of Unreal Engine. For example, if you wanted to show text with those transparent panels, the text would just be a blurry mess. And so it had to be like, and I didn't know all of this like right from the start. So I was like working on something, and I was like, oh damn, this doesn't work. And like, I have to create another panel. I have to like initialize it. I have to kind of like, when the mech starts up, all these panels need to get initialized, grab data. And for example, one of the other things was that it's super weird. Like, all right, so you go in, you want the weapon list from a mech, you kind of like create a loop to go through the weapon the mech weapon list, and even though the mech has weapons, the function returns nothing, and that's like you have to figure out. All right, so it hasn't populated the lists yet because it's another function that is being handled by code, and I don't know when that's gonna when that list is gonna be populated, so I can just grab it and initialize the panel. So like created like a self-validating loop so that okay, so if it's everything there, go ahead.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. The challenges were more technical, like creating like functions that like arranges weapons like in a curve.
Yeah.
That kind of thing was the main challenge. Other than that, the concept and idea was already there, and
Yeah.
that was a big help, basically.
Well, and like I said, I feel like it ticks the boxes. It's almost like, I wouldn't say it's minimalistic, but in some ways it's, I don't know, Android versus iPhone sort of idea, like what the idea of like MWO lists everything, plus where the weapons are on the inner, okay, and then these are the arms, or it's high, it's low, it's mid, it's chest, like it just, it flows. That makes sense,
Yep.
right? And I feel like something there. Plus, to me, the visual perspective, it's like this looks futuristic, like versus just this flat, white.
Although I should say that I play Mechwarrior Online a lot, and I don't want to play Mechwarrior Online with that 3D HUD.
Yeah.
Because like there's some aspect to that 3D HUD is basically art and artistic, like it's focused on the visual side of things.
Sure.
Like as like that was a good example, like iPhone versus Android is like functionality and kind of being used to something. I play the game using MWO.
Yeah.
I would prefer playing MWO using that HUD because that focuses on your performance in the game.
Yeah.
Mechwarrior 5, it's a single player game, and you kind of want that like visual aspect to be there.
Yeah.
And the vanilla HUD kind of broke that. I want to say immersion because it's so bland.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit
yeah.
in. It doesn't fit in with the kind of, because they've created this like really beautiful level generator, like the mechs. They're really nice. Like the textures are good, but the in-game experience that kind of puts you off. And it was
you're in this futuristic war machine. You've got all these panels and this and that, and then you get in and it's just that's it. Like there's no, and I don't think anybody disagrees there. So you also, you went from the UI and the HUD and 3D HUD. You did improved HUD, which I still think looks really good as well. And then you did the 3D HUD, and I think it speaks volumes because those are some of the most downloaded individual mods as well. So there's obviously plenty of people out there that want that. And with Reloaded as well, you took multiple things that you're working on and you put them in one package. Can we talk about the MechLab? Because like, I just feel like I don't know what the design decision, and maybe you've thought about it. Like the idea that was presented to us was the MechLab is the way it is because we want mechs to be unique, but I feel like it didn't quite hit the mark, and you've discussed why, but I want to hear your thinks of why. Have you ever thought of like why they didn't allow the customization to the extent that like at least MWO has? Like, because what are your thoughts? Have you been able to figure out, other than like, it's just decisions someone made and,
I don't know. Like, I can guess. I mean, that they were going for this like authentic, like BattleTech experience, like from the early '90s. I would say that like I don't know. These mechs are like relics of the past, and they're like unknown. They're not being made actively made. They're being made from like some ancient like blueprints and diagrams. I get that, but for that to have an effect, the world, the BattleTech world that like you're experiencing in the game needs to be a lot more about deathmatch in a mission. Like you drop in a mech and you want to go shoot a bunch of stuff. There has to be a lot more going on. Like for example, I started Mechwarrior with Mechwarrior 3. So that was when I was I don't remember. It was early, like it was 1999 maybe. And even though the focus of the game was on mech combat, uh, even if it didn't have a MechLab, the game has a narrative. It had all the, like not talking about like the story being good or bad. It had a story. It had an engage, like it made you kind of interested. Every mission tied to the last one, and basically your action from the previous mission carried over. Like if you lose your MFBs, you're not going to have one in the next mission.
Yeah.
And the narrative behind each mission continued from the last one, so you basically were interested. So even if it didn't have MechLab, the mechs themselves had cool tech on them. Like they had annihilators. Like it still has respectable firepower. Like the mechs in MechWarrior 3 were good, and MechWarrior 5, you kind of even with the handcrafted missions, the quests, even like some of those have like multiple parts, like part 1, part 2.
Sure.
You forget about the part 1 when you go to part 2. Like
Yeah.
what was that about?
Yeah.
Like it's there. Like that's the. I mean, it's not like I'm not being toxic or anything. It's just what I feel.
Yeah.
Like I don't feel any connection to these missions. Like why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Like what's is there any like MechWarrior 4 Vengeance? Like it had a corny like story, but still it at least allowed you to choose. I guess
Yeah.
like the final mission, you had an option to choose one
Yeah.
way or the other. It put the player in a situation so they can decide like, am I going to be like a douchebag, or am I going to
Yeah.
like sacrifice something to gain some like moral thing out of this mission? So there was like these missions, these choices. It felt alive. Those were missing in MechWarrior 5. So basically, because those aspects were not there, what's left?
Sure.
And what is left is basically, all right, so most of the people playing MechWarrior 5 also have played Mechwarrior Online. And in Mechwarrior Online, like the main aspect is PvP. The other aspect is basically fine-tuning your mechs. Like it's basically you're gathering mechs. You're basically a mech collector. Like
Sure.
even if
Pokemon,
if a
but
mech is
mechs. Yeah.
it's basically a Pokemon with mechs. Even if a mech is not really like top tier, you might still love it, and you
Yeah.
buy it and you play matches in it, and you enjoy customizing, like finding out the perfect thing in it.
Yeah.
In MechWarrior 5, that aspect was also missing.
Yeah.
So even on the field, you saw a stalker, the variant. Oh, I know what's on it. You saw an atlas. Oh, I know what's on it. So
Yeah.
it's not really kind of you know what I mean. That side of thing
It's
also
not
was
unique. Yeah. Yeah.
yes.
And then on top of that too, like I'd love to use the analogy, the cicada. Like I think
Yes.
Mech 5 runs into the same issues as BattleTech did when it first launched before mods and the Mech Labs as well, because like you think, oh, and going back to BattleTech 2 when it first launched, the best 50 tonner or best medium for missiles wasn't the Treb. It was the Centurion 9A, because you couldn't change the engine size. Well, the Centurion has a 200, so you had plenty of tonnage, and the next thing you know, that becomes the missile mech. Same issues. What lies is like, you know exactly. Okay, well, I just salvaged a cicada. It literally has no purpose, because it doesn't have Indo, it doesn't have Pharaoh. You can't swap the engine, so you only have like I don't know, it's like 2.5 tons of you can't do anything with that. You couldn't even up armor it. So literally, all it is just sell it. And to me, that's where it fell short. And I do feel like it was a mistake, because it was like, you didn't make the mechs unique. If anything, you just sort of handicap their ability to perform, I guess, or to like to be, I don't know. It just, there was no customization whatsoever. I just don't, it blew my mind, because like, okay, let's just say you are a super, you're viewing it sort of like, you know, like, hey, you're a tanker, you can't modify your, you know, tank. Okay, I understand that. Like, okay, but you could have just brought over that functionality anyways, and then obviously large percentage of people who use Reloaded and or Merc Tech or any of the other ones could still modify their mechs. And it just, to me, because you didn't have the depth in the story and even the quest where, hey, we're doing a quest, but it's not a handcrafted mission. You're doing you know, like demolition basically, or you're doing Warzone, and that's where I feel like the problems too is like, it just feels like, what were we just doing? Why was that important? Do I protect the farmers, or do I, or, you know, or like
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, even in BattleTech, I want to add, some of the mechs were not as limiting as they were in Mechwarrior 5. It's like, I remember the Atlas in BattleTech, you could at least like do things on it, like you can put 2 AC-20s on it, like something that is not even possible in Mechwarrior Online.
Yeah.
And even if the engine is locked, they still give you the option. It's like the energy hard points on the Atlas. It had the option. It had the possibility for you to like play around with the mech. Like the only limiting factor was the engine. Mechwarrior 5 is one stage even more limiting than locking out the engine, and was basically locking the hard points to the stock loadout. And some of the stock loadouts, well, a single PPC might be something on itself, but when the other weapon system on a mech is an LRM 10, well, there's very little you can do with that. I mean, LRM 10 can only be replaced with SRM 6 and below.
Yep.
And the PPC can be replaced with everything below.
Yeah.
So you have the option. You have the option to make your mech worse.
Yeah.
That is, I don't know.
It narrows your choice.
Yeah, it's basically there's no incentive to even play with the mech in the MechLab. So
because it's like, this mech does it and does everything better. Like,
yeah,
and that's where, like, I think the MechLab, or even if you didn't do the MechLab, I felt like there were other ways. Like, if mechs, obviously they're adding quirks with the DLC, and or like the idea of like, what is a mech made out of, outside of just the superficial stuff that we do with weapons or engine. Like, is there any unique abilities as far as sensors or capabilities? You don't really have anything like that. So it's almost like saying, well, how do you make like a, you know, an RPG character or something like that, you know, where, you know, using the QWERTY, you know, keys or whatever. But yeah, like I you know, obviously not just sit around and I just feel like the MechLab was just one of those things where, because you've done Reloaded with the MechLab as well, I just feel that it was a really missed opportunity to, and instead of making mechs unique, like I said, I feel like what it did is it funneled them into obscurity, because like, you literally would get it and you just didn't care. Like, you didn't, you know, like,
I mean, that's another point of Mechwarrior 5, is that it has all these planets that you can basically move around. It's something that is a first in Mechwarrior 5. And like, these planets have markets, and like, you can go in the market, look for something. And as you mentioned, like, this approach that they went for the MechLab, it kind of de-incentivizes the market. It's like you see the mechs that are available, and you're like, well, I have the things that I have. are already like way better than everything in the market that's going to be from now until the end of the game. So there's no incentive like to even like check the market. You just salvage things and sell them for
Yeah.
seagulls.
Yeah.
So I think that's another missed opportunity here. That if they allowed people to play around with the mechs, they could basically make something that they loved.
Yeah.
Like one thing that I usually see in Mechwarrior 5 Discord in like screenshot section, like people share the builds that they think are really great. Like they might be like cheese builds or like things that, but it's actually pretty awesome. Like people come up with ideas like, hey, look at this mech I built, like this Rex face,
Yeah.
and this is great. So this is something. Mm, I think it was a missed opportunity, like on this front alone.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
But I mean,
yeah.
looking at the future, like for the game and the mod, I feel like some of this ties into the, I guess you would, obviously the systems, but it's like balancing the economy of like the like what is the purpose? What is the purpose of salvage? What is the purpose of
Hmm.
being able to negotiate points for like a contract? I feel like a lot of these things tie into each other. Obviously, we have the DLC, we have the new beachhead mission. We're getting infantry. With Reloaded, we haven't had any updates in a bit. I wanted to ask,
Hmm.
like, what is your current like sort of plans for Reloaded, and or what is your future? Are you just waiting until December 10th and then we get an update?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of waiting for the DLC. Like, there are some things in the DLC that makes a bunch of things that I was basically doing with spit and duct tape way easier.
Yeah,
Because right now you have to work with what you can access or what's available. But for example, with all this like skill system, with like other types of like equipment that they added to the game, there's a lot more options to create like custom equipments. For example, like all the like upgrade modules in Reloaded, like heat vents, I don't know, like reinforced arms, that sort of thing. Those are all using heatsink data asset.
yeah,
So if as long as the game is concerned, those are heat sinks,
gotcha.
but they are tweaked in a way so that they don't affect the mech's cooling. And basically, there's other functions in place that detects them. And basically, all right, so you have this much of this module, you have this module. All right, so tweak the mech stats in this way, tweak the mech stat in that way. Like the weapons on these arms should generate less heat. Set it to be so. So that's kind of the approach. With some of the added equipment, more kind of like versatility can be added to things. For example, ECM was something that they said that they're going to
Yeah,
implement. So I don't think like anyone put time on implementing
yeah,
ECM. I know like Merktech, Magnum GB was working on like implementing something like for ECM. But I guess like people are just waiting for the DLC because there are a lot of things that are being added. And right now, like from the modding perspective, like some of those are like, to be honest, are concerning. It's like, do I have to redevelop
yeah,
some of these
yeah,
functions because like these data assets, like that's another thing I was going to mention like initially is like modding tools and development tools. It's like when you release the development tools, you're developing in parallel to the source, and whatever the source develops, if it's not compatible, it's going to invalidate your work, and you need to
yeah,
do it again. You
yeah,
cannot kind of like latch on to something. You have to redevelop it from
yeah.
scratch. So yeah,
That's the
that's
pains of being
something
a
that,
modder. Like
yeah, that's
even if you're
yeah.
talking about Skyrim or any other, like the reality of it is you are beholden sometimes to. And I, like, of course, I don't. There's no. I think like it is just what it is sometimes. Obviously, I don't think they want to hose anybody, but like, yeah. So let me ask you, I mean, obviously you've tackled UI, you've tackled lasers, the visual, you've IK, you've done MechLab, you've got Rescale. Have you thought about diving in? Because like a person like you, I feel like that's all well and good, but I still feel like, does that make you want to play the missions over and over again? And I feel like the missions, now that they're released, have you dove into the mission creation process? Because like, or what would you do to the game right now to improve the procedural stuff? Because like for me, it's one of those where it gets repetitive really quick. It's the same old, same old. Now, I did talk to Tori, and we've got plans for Mech Manor, and it's the idea that with the DLC, they're adding, well, it's already there as far as secondary, tertiary objectives and stuff like that, but other stuff to happen as well. I mean, have you put in a lot of thought to like that? Like, because MechLab's cool, UI HUD's cool, but then it's only got so much before, like it can only take the game so far. Have you thought outside that?
I mean, I've thought about it, yet like real world work and like the workload that I'm dealing with has left little time for that. I mean, even on Reloaded, it's like I was cutting sleep hours basically on that. So it was like 3 hour.
You don't have an
4
addictive
hour.
personality. It doesn't, no, not when it comes to, you see a problem and you're like, I'm gonna find that, like, no, not at all.
Yeah, I mean, I do, but still, it's like I'm gonna fix it eventually, or
Yeah.
someone else will.
Someone else will. Yeah.
I mean, there's also another thing. It's like when the editor was initially released and the MechLab and Mechwarrior 5 initially released, since basically I spent like 7 hours or so like playing the game, like completing the game. And then it was all about the editor, like wrestling with the functions and like the finding the cause of like this and that error. And then like opening the game, closing the game, opening the game, closing the game. Does it work? Does it not work?
Yeah.
Create this situation, like test it, test it, test it. It works. Yes, it works. It kind of like detaches you from the game, and it becomes like a project.
It's like a
And
job.
yeah, and then it's basically
Okay,
if you're like
let me rephrase this. What would you like to see done to Mech 5 outside of what we're getting from DLC? Like, if you have specific, like, what would you like to see out of Mech 5?
I mean, I don't know what's in the DLC with regards to missions. Like, I don't know if missions are like personalized or not. I would like a little bit more story, like because I'm just thinking about like Mechwarrior 5 without mods, like just as a game that is going to be released, for example, on Steam, and some player out there like, oh, it's a game, I want to play it.
Sure.
And the game like on itself needs to kind of like offer good gameplay, like a good experience. And I would like to see like personalized missions that you care about. Like, for example, when you're running through the buildings, who are these guys? Like, what faction I'm representing? Like, are the faction standings are going to change? Because right now your only interactions are with portraits of like some dude. Oh, it's Kurita and that's
Yeah.
Steiner. A little bit more personal with what's going on. Like Mechwarrior 4, I remember Mechwarrior 4 Mercenaries. It wasn't like as expansive as Mechwarrior 5. Like you couldn't go anywhere, but the places you could go, you could interact. Like there was interaction between like the faction you were doing missions for. There were like missions that were back to back. Like there were dialogues in it that was linked to the previous events.
Gotcha.
Things, yeah, and then you kind of cared about what's going on,
Yeah.
and you kind of cared about things. If that aspect comes back to Mechwarrior 5, like if even in BattleTech, even if, like, in my opinion, this story-wise, it was a little bit short and shallow, but still, you kind of followed that, followed the narrative, followed the story. Like, there was people are out there gunning for you, and in Mechwarrior 5, it kind of it loses.
You don't have as much
Uh,
connection with your crew either,
yeah,
right? You don't
yeah.
have the
It's more of
connection.
a
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's more of a sandbox rather
yeah.
than
Well, which is what they
you.
went. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
right.
Rather than, like, even like I want to, like, use an example like Skyrim and The Witcher 3. I don't know if you played those games or
Yeah,
not. Skyrim is a sandbox. Like, you can have a quest pinging like for 3 years, and like things happen, and you can go anywhere. You can go there. Like, you can level something, completely forget about something else. The world of Witcher 3 is also like an open world, but it's a living world.
sure.
You can have like interact in a more kind of immersive way to the world. That sort of thing kind of sets apart the experience between like something that MechWarrior 5 is right now. I think they've mentioned that they're working on like hero mech quests.
Yep.
I hope they kind of like bring about this aspect, but yeah, we will see.
Yeah, and I think for me, at least looking at it, is I think what's tough is, and I use this analogy, it's sort of like watching Bob Ross when he first starts, right? He's painting, he does these large swaths, right? So their large swath is your merc. We want you to travel from planet to planet and do these contracts. But when you
Hmm.
do that, there's not a whole lot of detail because you're doing these large swipes of the brush, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, you can see the mountain, but like, and whatever, but, and that's where I feel like the DLCs really need to add, because the missions, the problem with procedural missions is that if it doesn't have enough variance and variables, to
Hmm.
me at least,
Yeah.
like every single Warzone should not be the same. Also, like make it unique. Make it instead of it just dropping more drop ships. I mean, one that like that's another thing too. Is it's like it almost feels to me like it's it suspends reality a bit for me, because I am a military guy, and like, and I've read all the novels, and about the lore, like
Hmm.
dropships are so valuable that you don't really put them at risk. To a
Yeah.
planet, some backworld planet doesn't have literally 10 dropships. You may have
Yeah.
one dropship on the planet. And then on
Yeah.
top of that, like if we're gonna, and I talked about this with Tori, if you're gonna do an assassination mission, right? As
Hmm.
soon as you land, and this is where the cool thing is, like if there's secondary objectives, like if there's sensor towers or radar towers, or maybe your target was a base and you're trying to take out a colonel, as soon as you
Hmm.
land and then they detect you, it should be like warnings and klaxons, and they should either
Yeah.
rally up to try to kill you, get the VIP, or maybe they know who you're trying to come out, and you've got this 5-minute window to kill him, sort of like the original Mech Commander, funny enough,
Yep.
missions, or if you didn't, stuff like that, where it's realistic. Or you'd have this warning saying, like you're violating, like House Steiner, whatever space, and on next thing you know, it's like, hey, hey boss, you have multiple incoming dropships entering, like you have 5 minutes, and if you don't kill that target and get out of there, we're gonna have it. Like, to me, that
Hmm.
makes more sense, right? And I didn't, and that's where I feel it's like sort of lacking, because if you just keep playing, it's the same thing. And here's the thing: some people like that gameplay loop currently. All I'm saying is I just want to see the gameplay loops expanded, so it's a unique experience every single time. You mentioned uh, uh, not having almost like an antagonist. Like that's what BattleTech did, right? Like it created this big story loop of, okay, your family and your world is taken away from you, and oh, it's from your uncle, and your uncle's this bad guy, and your cousin now is a bad guy, but then, oh, well, you killed this other dude's son, and now he's coming after you. Like,
Yep.
If you had that type of stuff to where your actions had repercussions potentially, like if you did piss off Liao and they send a death squad after you, like, so you're out just doing a regular mission, all of a sudden, hey boss, we're picking up, we don't know what's inbound to you, or something like that. All of a sudden a dropship lands and it's like, you know, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even Mechwarrior 4 had this type of missions. Like, you save a lance in one mission, and then the next, like, another mission, you're solo, like, defending something, and you're being overwhelmed, and, like, suddenly, like, your tactical officer, like, says that, oh, I'm picking up, like, you're already overwhelmed, and, like, she's saying that, oh, I'm picking up additional mechs, like, coming your way. You're in trouble, and suddenly, like, they come in as like, hey, like, you remember us? You saved us from back from like in that mission, like back on that planet. We're here to basically like like lend you a hand. So it's basically things that that you remember after you play the game. So yeah, I mean these sort of things, like BattleTech did a good job. Like in Mechwarrior 5, when the tutorial ends, you're given a name like Black Inferno, a corporation. Well, are you gonna feel something about it? So is it someone? Like, what do they want? Like they just landed and like killed this dude, which you didn't even allow us to kind of interact and kind of like form a relationship with this character. Like it's like it was the tutorial guy. Like that's basically it. So there's nothing more to that. So remember, Mechwarrior 4, you were basically a lance mate up until to a level. Like you were under command. Like the drop commander was someone else, and you're basically completing missions with them. And that was like, and through chatter and like back and forth, like fun banter.
Mech 4's intro sets the tone. I mean, you see your father sacrifice himself so you and your family can get out of there. I mean, that sets the but the same thing in Mech 5, you're just like
it's the tutorial guy. Basically the tutorial guy dies. And like in Mech 4, like the opening scene, the scene itself is dramatic. Like it shows you, it makes you feel sorrow for the losses that you're seeing, and basically builds up on it. Mechwarrior 5, it's just, as I said, it's the tutorial guy. The tutorial guy dies, and basically a statue gives you something on a holographic table, and I mean there's no connection.
To be fair, Russ did say that was their weakest thing, and you felt that it was tacked on. But I feel like with a little bit of work, and this is one thing we don't know, is are they going to touch up that? Like, is Rihanna actually going to have a cool looking outfit instead of what they have? Same thing with like to me, what I felt like, and this is what I brought up with Russ on the podcast, that the critique of Mech 5 would be, in BattleTech, you could go and ask your engineer a question, and then it's like the normal RPG, like, oh, what would you like to know, right? And, oh, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get here? Where did you come from? Did you have anything else to ask? And if you don't have that with Rihanna or Fahad, and so you have this character, which it's, again, I just feel like, I understand why it happened. They just didn't have time. That's what it was, time and money, right? To where Fahad has backstory, and he talks the way he does, but you're never exposed to that inside Mech 5. And so you've just got this like annoying, like, what is that? Like and then, and like I see that same thing with like, spears and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if they're going to clean that up, make it a little bit better. And we actually just don't know. Like, are they going to, for a Steam launch, are they going to improve that initial sort of setting? But you know, I've talked a lot about Mech 5, and I feel like a lot of people are probably going to tune in for the next topic, and that's Mechwarrior Online. Man, you've been involved for years and years, as far as giving input. Let's go ahead and just start with the initial, I guess, impression of when Podcast 204 came out. What were you excited, or were you more, as others said, you know, I'll believe it when I see it? Like, what were your initial feelings?
I mean, I was in a like I was and I'm still like happy that at least there's intention from PGI to come back to Mechwarrior Online and kind of like start working on Mechwarrior Online in some aspect. I mean, I don't know to what extent, but at least when I see that they're not abandoning it, that's something positive. Because like after, was it June 2019, I think Russ had a podcast with you, and back then he announced that, well, there's not going to be any more mech packs, there's not going to be any more patches as frequently, and that kind of like sounded the alarm for people. Oh, Mechwarrior Online is done, like even they are done with it. So let's enjoy the last days of this game. But now that we know that they didn't have the license, they just renewed it, and they want to come back to it, it is something that gives people like kind of like hope, I can say. Yet because of the past experiences, that PGI were involved and were actively developing Micro Online, some decisions were made that were not really well received. Like some decisions were made that were not communicated, that were not kind of like, because one thing that through the years in Micro Online that was happening was that when they changed something, unless it was like out of whack broken, there was no hope for that to get fixed in the next 6 months. And that's with the community basically like posting rants on the forums nonstop.
Yeah.
So it was something that the frustration came from that. And like when people were saying, all right, so you did this, why don't you just, you know, it's a problem, why don't you just go there and fix it? It's a very easy fix. I don't know, like I can guess that perhaps they were really busy with Mechwarrior 5, with the development of Mechwarrior 5. Like they couldn't spare any engineer hours for Mechwarrior Online, because on the surface it's just editing an XML. Like a lot of those fix is just editing an XML. You can make custom mechs using editing XMLs, and but it has to be kind of tested. It has to be kind of like validated by an engineer to make sure that, okay, so nothing's broken, everything's working. And I think they couldn't spare any engineer hours to work on that.
MechCon 2018, I mean, really, that's I mean, when Russ went up there and Paul didn't have any answer, I think that it's funny because I was working, I was running back and forth, and so I remember seeing it, but I had someone tell me like they knew exactly, like Mech 5 was front and stage, and it pretty much seemed like MWO was just pushed to the side. I'm just always surprised by that as well too, considering Mechwarrior Online has been so successful. You'd think that that would be your main like focus and stuff like that. But I mean, from a development standpoint and a team, like you only have so many people. You can't just keep hiring and hiring and hiring. Someone out there's like, well, just hire more engineers. You probably have never owned a business and you don't understand, like that's not practical. But let's dive into some talks. You were on the podcast, the community podcast. with the crew, and I wanted to pick your brain about things because I got Nutty Rat's perspective. I've talked to Tori. One of the big things was skill tree. I would say skill tree scale. Me and you have talked a lot about scale behind the scenes because of Mech 5 as well from the gameplay, but also for MWO. And of course, 8v8 and so forth and so on. So let me go and just start with solo, group queue, 8v8, 12v12. What are your opinions on it and why? How do you feel? Should groups be well, obviously I don't think it's crazy to also assume like if population grew you can split groups again. I think that's a given. Like they would probably do that, right? But sell me on 8v8. What makes it better than what we have right now? Why would the masses benefit from it? Or do you feel that way?
Yeah, just from the solo play perspective, like we will get to group queue as well. Just from the solo play perspective, I think 8v8 would be better than what we currently have. Like, and the reason being, like the maps themselves. When you have like 12 mechs on one side and 12 mechs on the other side, there's no real way to kind of like have any sort of like control over the battle when you can get overwhelmed in an instant, even though like the majority of the team, like you have like like 8 mechs on one side of a hill and 4 on the other side of the hill, and the firepower itself that's in there. Like for example, let's say you're a sniper, you want to kite around the map, and you want to shoot and you want to control the map. Because there's so much going on in the game and so many mechs in there, you better off, not doing it. It's like, all right, so grab a mech that can like put out huge amount of DPS and just go farming, because that's the name of the game. Like there's if you don't do that, you have to rely on 11 other people to survive the DPS from the enemy team, so you can basically control the tone of the battle. So it eliminates a lot of like roles and kind of like funnels into a bunch of like mechs that are built to farm solo queue, like put out as much damage as possible in the shortest amount of time. Like that's what, like there are multiple factors to like what mechs can do that, but really like there's only like a few mechs that are capable of that. Like just talking about the solo queue in 12v12, and when you have like a bunch of those mechs in the same match, the match ends really quickly. And from the perspective of a new player, well, they just launch into a match and they get annihilated quickly because they don't know the map.
So
Like,
if I can jump in, is that a 12v12 issue, or is that more of just power creep from the mechs and what's capable now?
I think it's a 12. Like part of it is 12v12.
Okay.
Because there's just so much on the map. Like there's one, like another case that happens usually is that the NASCAR. Usually NASCAR starts when two players want to have some flanks on the enemy team. And when you have more players, suddenly like you see like 5 players are trying to have a flank on the enemy. And you basically have like a bunch of lights who are out of nowhere, like nowhere near the bulk of the team. And you have the isolated like heavyweights at the back who are trying to catch up, who are not seeing anyone to shoot at, and the enemy team is doing the same thing. So you have no chance of fighting against like 5 mechs, all with DPS flanking your side. You're just gonna die, or you have to run for your life. Like running for your life is the experience right now in 12v12. You have to kind of like step on heads and shoulders of your teammates to come on top, to stay alive. And like there are some cases when it gets to like, well, like 12, like a 1v1 at the end, or like a 3v4 at the end, and it's really close. But 90% of the time, it's
Okay.
just a snowball.
So
And that's the thing. Yeah.
So okay, numbers wise, I can sort of see that angle. But you mentioned the player behavior there, which is, you know, maybe two lights went to go flank, but now it's lights and mediums. I have to question is, again, when you have mechs like the Vulcan, or you have mechs, medium mechs with as much firepower, you know, and sometimes structure or armor and a heavy and stuff, like, I just feel like I don't know if 8v8 is the end all be all there, because I feel like it's a onion, right? It's like multiple layers
Yeah.
have over the period of 8 years have
Oh,
led to,
100%.
like, why do we see it now so much? Or like when in NASCAR, like now it's like instantly the match starts and people are like, boom, they're gone. Like that's so I just don't know, would 8v8 get rid of that? Or would it just,
I mean,
you know, go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, from a solo perspective, I mean, I feel like you mentioned the assaults getting lagged behind and they're always trying to catch up, but I also feel like assaults aren't as scary as they were, right? And
Mhm.
I mean, is that they're slower, they're easier to kill, right? Some of them do have some nice firepower on them, but like it doesn't mean anything when you're getting flaked by, you know, like, how do you like?
I mean,
Go ahead.
I can give you an example.
Sure.
Let's imagine Canyon Network. Like usually that's the map that the NASCAR is more evident around the centerpiece. If it consider an 8v8 situation when you're basically in a Fafnir or a direwolf, you on yourself is more than capable of holding your line against a heavy mech and a medium mech, and that's all you need to do. Like you know where the position you they call the spine on Canyon, and like for example, if you park your mech, if you don't follow through with the NASCAR, if you park your mech there, use the cover that is there, and and wait for the enemy, like because that's usually the overlooking one of the corners on that NASCAR racetrack. And basically, you can control the NASCAR if it's just against like one grasshopper and like one, I don't know, Stormcrow, something. You have enough firepower to counter it. And I'm just talking about like one or two maybe assault mechs there. In 12v12, when that number in front of you is not two mechs, it's usually four mechs, and you get overwhelmed. And basically, one of them will start charging you. Two of them will start charging you. There's also you have no control on what weapons the enemy can take. So they can be brawlers. They can just charge you, and you basically get outnumbered quickly. Even now in 12v12, if you can convince, if you have enough mechs on your team, assault mechs on your team, like two Mad Cat 2Bs and a Fafnir, and you park in that spine, you basically steamroll the enemy lance if they try to NASCAR. So basically, it comes down to like the numbers, and NASCAR gets frustrating because of that. Because usually a fast assault mech and a slow assault mech at the back usually gets picked up by the fast wolf pack, and the wolf pack moves on and basically gets on the next target. I mean, I've been in a solo match in a single wolfhound. I killed 11 enemy mechs because of that.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, so there was no fight going on. People were running after each other, and basically I was the only fast mech on my team, and the enemy team didn't have any fast mech. I basically backcourt 11 mechs. So that's a problem.
Sure.
And
So it's twofold though, because like that's game design issues, maybe of the too many mechs, too much firepower, but also player behavior is just like, we're just gonna, whatever, fatty, sorry, you guys are gonna be sacrificed, like, eh.
Yeah, I mean, another part of it is map knowledge. Like usually, because if for you to be able to hold that spine is that you know that this is a power position. You have tried it before, and you have to have like really high confidence in what you're doing in order to kind of like go against something, like go against the NASCAR that is happening. So it's not generally there in the player base right now. Like the easiest maneuver they can go with, and they have seen being played, is that if I run from the enemy and catch the slow ones at the back, I can just get kills and put damage into them, because no one wants to face like 6 charging enemy mechs all by themselves. There's also another issue of trust. I've seen many times in the game, like people calling, please don't NASCAR, like let's not NASCAR, let's go there, don't NASCAR, but it ends up in a NASCAR anyway. Because in a solo play game, you don't trust people. Like, okay, so I just told these guys to hold there. Are they gonna do it? Because if they don't do it, I'm screwed. So I just choose the safest way. So I just go there and like I do the NASCAR as well, and I do it better.
Yeah.
So that's basically the reason. And 12, like 12, I get what you're saying. 12v12 and 8v8, they can kind of like amplify a problem that is not related necessarily to 8v8 or 12v12. Like 12v12 can amplify a problem.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah,
like we're having the discussions out there, and that's why I'm just asking people, because like, are we is it you can't see the forest through the trees sort of thing? Like, you know, hey, cool, we go to 8v8, or hey, you make these changes to this or that, but is it the mobility of the game? Is it the fact of quirks have gotten out of hand, and you know, the mechs, you know, is it the fact of the mechs that are still really, really good in that sort of push this have the mobility, whereas the other ones don't? Like, or is it, what are we missing? Like, if I was to ask you, how do you make 12v12 work then? Like, if we were to say, okay, instead of saying 8v8, how do you make 12v12 work? Like, wouldn't that just as equally be a good question, instead of just saying, well, just revert to 8v8? Well, you already have 12v12 there. You know, how do you make that? How do you change the behavior of the game? What needs to be changed? I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes to the level design. Like, let me go back, like faction play, when they released faction play. Like level design is something other than map design. Like, yes, you can like create something that looks beautiful, like that's art. Level design is something that you need to be a player to know that, all right, so is this map feature that I'm designing, is it going to be like a power position? Is it going to be exploited? Like, how is it going to play? For 12v12, I think you need to design your levels around it. Like, because right now the maps that we have, like Canyon, like dumping 24 mechs on it, it's just a mess. A map like, I don't know, Alpine Peaks, that is something that can suit 12v12 play. Like, because you have enough space, you have enough like lines, you have enough positions for 3 lances to basically control the flow of the fight. Or if you want to go like, if you want to delve deeper into 12v12 play, honestly, I would redesign faction play from scratch, because right now what we have as faction play, I mean, it's fun. It's like, yeah, 12, you jump in with your friends and you have respawns, but I would redesign faction play, primarily the maps and levels. Right now we have siege mode, which was the main mode of faction play, and it's basically zombie horde mode, with one side getting to play as the zombies. So it's not like the first map that they released for faction play, Boreal. It's just, you just need a bunch of long range weapons sitting on the base, and the enemy team can't even open the gate. Like sometimes the defenders need to let the attackers open the gate so the match can move on. Otherwise, they're stuck.
To back up here, so are you saying that you would rather just keep solo in groups 8, but if you want the 12, go to faction play? Is that what you're saying? Because like, what I'm asking is, how do you make faction, or how do you make 12v12 work in group play?
In group, like that's also level design. I mean, it's all about level design. You have to have enough space for 3 lances to work on a map. You cannot do it in a map like Canyon.
Yeah.
You can sort of do it in Tourmaline, but Tourmaline Deserts is also centered around like a limited space.
Yeah,
in the
it
center.
sort of pincers in, so you do it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
what you're basically saying is like the reality of it is you had 8v8 that worked well on the smaller maps, but as soon as you went to 12v12, it also exacerbates the issues. Like I said, even on Tourmaline or I mean, Rubelite would be a good example, I guess, of a map done right with verticality. It allows short range, long range plays, maneuverability, and stuff like that. But you still have NASCAR that happens on Rubelite, like to some extent, somewhat.
I mean, NASCAR on Rubelite, it's really like it's rare. Like a full-on NASCAR, based on what I've seen, like usually it's not scouting the enemy. It's basically, all right, so you don't. I have to be honest. Many people don't know maps, like where the normal approach path for the enemy, and basically, like if you don't see the enemy on that position, where can they be?
Yeah.
So yeah, and they still go to that position, and they get greeted by like 10 enemy mechs, like in their face.
Yeah.
So it's like usually that's the problem on a map like Rubelite, because of the verticality of the map. Scouting is way more important than on the other maps, because if you want to know, all right, so the platform I'm standing on, like, are there mechs under it? Can I jump down in case of danger? Or like there's lots going on in that map, which can play into 12v12, and 12v12 on that map plays well.
Yeah.
Yet on maps that are centered around like a limited space,
HPG, Caustic Valley, Canyon Network,
yes, exactly,
Hypernal, like all of the.
Yeah, those turn into a mess.
Yeah.
And in those situations, as I said, the more DPS you have, the more the chances of your success will be. Like, for example, you take a Mad Cat 2B, and it's basically dumping as many bullets into the enemy as you can, like in the shortest amount of time, and pray
I
that
love the mech,
weapon. Yeah, basically pray that the weapons don't jam.
Yeah.
So that becomes the gameplay.
Yeah.
So,
and then you throw in a little bit of organization on comms or a group, and it definitely tips in their favor. Okay, so like
and the group queue, as you mentioned, I don't know how to feel about it, because in 8v8, having a 4-man in 8v8,
it's a lot. It's a lot of control.
Yes, I would say even in 12v12 right now, having a good 4-man on one team, it controls the match. It's
100%.
basically, because you just storm an enemy lance, you completely destroy it, and that's instantly an advantage. Like, even if you have like other less experienced people on your team, you can compensate. You just go and start killing the rest of the enemy team. It's very kind of simple.
Yeah.
In
it was
8v8, it's gonna be worse.
Yeah, and that's where I was gonna like ask, because like I not only, like I said, I'm not necessarily convinced, because again, I feel like we may be missing other stuff here, but like the fact of the matter is PGI is at least recognized that, when they made the solo and group queue, they said, hey, we gotta bring it back down. We're gonna do 4-man. You're gonna have this amount of tonnage. I still think that's way too much currently. And from a balance perspective, it should be 2-mans and then limited on tonnage. But like, even you guys in that panel recognize how much groups can sway the outcome of the match. And then when I heard it was like, well, let's just keep 4-mans. Well, let's keep actually 2 to 8-mans. And I'm thinking, that's why I was asking Nutty, like, how many people are at that level of what you're talking about? I mean, Ash and me were talking about it in stream chat. It's like, well, if you're less than 1%, are you advocating potentially for a group queue that actually isn't good for the game and the casual players? Because if the idea is that you have 4-mans, I still feel like it would just make a group queue that really good players would just be rolling around stomping the shit out of people. But the only way to change that is not tonnage, not weight class restrictions. It's limiting the amount of players in a group. I mean, that's the only way you can do that, right? I mean,
I think another thing was brought up in that, like something like an opt-in for solo players.
yeah,
Like you have an option that, all right, so you know what you're getting into, and like by default have group play and solo play separate, or just allow two-man groups in solo play. If you want to play more than a two-man group, you have another kind of queue, but I guess that requires some development on that side.
sure. Yeah, probably.
That will allow solo players to have a tick or an option for group queue opt-in. Like I'm a solo player,
Sure.
but I don't mind. I don't mind playing, being kind of dragged
Yeah.
into a group play if I can help make a match.
Yeah.
Solo, or you can basically just choose not to. You
Yeah.
want to stick to solo play, and you do that.
My only concern would be like if you're designing group queue to be 8-man and you're relying on solos, what happens if there aren't solos there? That I feel like that it's like another variable that potentially might cause some matchmaking, or like where it can't find a match because it's looking for like one person or three individuals, or oh, there's not a 3-man. Like, and that's what I was saying is like, wouldn't the easier route just to say just make it 2-mans, or oh, if you want to like, are people wanting a group queue to be competitive? Is that what the masses want? Like, is that what, you know what I'm saying? Like, is like when you enter in a 4-man group, like, you're going to get, I mean, because we used to have those matches back in the day. SJR, Lords, all those. I remember those days. Like, and some of those matches were really good. You'd have groups that were part of the same unit fighting each other, but sometimes they would accidentally be in the same, right? So what is, and I guess that's my question to you, what would you like to see? What do you think it should be? Should it be more lean towards casual, or should it go more towards a hardcore sort of competitive play where you're going to have to bring your A game?
I mean, if it was me, I would limit the size of group for solo queue to 2-man, and then have another queue if you want to go like higher, like 7-man, 8-man, whatever, 6-man. And I still think that there are solo players that are they're going to opt in that mode of play because they just want a match. Like the better, like the sooner they get a match, the better.
Okay.
If you're in a 4-man and you're not finding matches, well, we can just make two-man groups and stop dropping the solo queue. So I think that would be that's my opinion. I mean, people might disagree, and I can understand because right now, like me and my unit play 4-man groups in solo queue, and it's fun. It's basically relaxed play. But even 12v12, it's really commanding. So like uh like I have seen matches that we basically dropped in AC10 urban mechs and double D'd the entire enemy team. Like the entire 12 enemy players no more than 100 damage.
Yeah.
Like that's a command. Like that is something you might be having fun, but it's I personally think that it's not good for longevity of
It's interesting
the game. Yeah.
because you're bringing up a good conversation, which is maybe statistically what you guys are doing is so small in the grand scheme of things of games kicking off. But to me, I'm thinking, yeah, but every single time that person's going up against those groups, it's like, oh shit. Like there's been a few, like in this past month, I've dropped against you being solo, and I'm like, oh, there's Navid, there's I'm like, like
I dropped solo. Yeah, I dropped solo against groups, and I'm like, well, this is gonna be a tough one. Like I'm just here to chill. I'm just here to relax. But now it's like it's
the weight. It's
game
like
on.
the balance is like like I'm gonna There's been matches too where it's like it'll be a 3-man, and within the first minute and a half, I already know that I'm gonna lose.
I mean, yeah, because you're playing and suddenly like it's 2 minutes in the game and 4 people in your team are dead.
Just
So
like And that's like, I don't know, man. Like I sometimes wonder if like this may come up. Is NASCAR just the ultimate like evolution of the game too? Like where, and what I mean is, I don't know, this may sound stupid, but like we were all potatoes back in the day. Like is that the reason we didn't see it as much anymore? And then it's just started picking up, and then as the top players and their information trickle down, and things maybe get a little bit faster, and you get a little bit more map awareness, all that. Is this, I don't know. That's,
I mean, I think it's not the ultimate evolution, because countering in NASCAR is pretty easy
yeah,
in quick play game. If people listen, like you
yeah,
can just call the entire
yeah,
team into a position
yeah,
and basically say, all right, so guys, ready your weapons, prepare
yeah,
to shoot, and we're
yeah.
gonna win the game.
Well, even
That's
on,
basically it. Yeah.
yeah, even on Canyon, it's like, hey guys, the one, I forget, the one where you're down low, and it's like all you have to do is just wait until they ridge, because they're already rotating.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, just
Yeah.
wait, just 3, 2, 1. Oh, blam, same. It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like I said, ignore that comment. I was just, I don't know. It's,
Yeah. I mean, that's basically like if, as I said, it comes to map knowledge and experience.
sure.
If you don't have playtime experience, it's gonna delve into a NASCAR because that's the safest approach. You haven't tried anything else, and you've seen, because NASCAR has two sides, and one side always wins. So it's like you've seen NASCAR winning games, and and you're like, all right, so I just take a fast mech and start running after the enemy, and I don't need to trust anyone, and basically I can fight my own fight. So
Yeah,
it is something that comes into the nature of solo play, and how the NASCAR goes, because it's all about the experience in the game and knowing the map, and you don't choose your teammates in solo play. So
gotcha.
that's the thing why it's so kind of like prevalent. If you've played faction play on some of the quick play maps, there's no NASCAR at all. Like, let's say you're dropping an 8-man with the team and you're up against a 12-man enemy team. Absolutely no NASCAR. Like, that's, I think that's enough evidence for me. It's like it's about lack of experience
Gotcha.
in solo
Okay.
queue.
So we've talked about group, we talked about solo. Can we talk about skill tree? What
Mm-hmm.
what would you like to see done there?
I mean, I agree with this skill tree, but not a skill puzzle. Right now, it's a maze. I mean, you have this because Mechwarrior Online on itself is a complicated game. Like when
Yeah,
players come in,
it's
there
very
are
complicated. Yeah,
lots of things going on. Like even just building your mechs, like all these equipments, like what do they do? Like how many, the ghost heat, like it's so overwhelming
yeah,
for a new player to kind of digest. And then there's a skill tree, which is big part of like optimizing and building your mechs. And on itself, it's also a puzzle. All right, so which path is the more optimal? Can I get one more range node from that, or can I get one more cooldown from that path? Like, can I have that? Can I have this? Um, it's really overwhelming. Like, I think all they needed to do, and that is something that, if I want to discuss this, it's like if they want to change anything to this on the skill tree, there would be another refund. It's inevitable.
yeah. They're gonna have
And
to do that regardless.
yes,
Yeah,
like right now there's like nine, like I don't mind it, but some people might do. I mean, I would hope that they do a refund and redesign the skill tree. But I mean, I understand if they fear that people would respond negatively, but that's a can of worms, as Russ says it, that I'm willing to open.
yeah,
It's like, all right, so do it right, do it once. So you just reduce the number of nodes, make those percentages kind of noticeable. When you're skilling your mechs, it's a grind, it's a marathon, and when it's over like 100 matches for a single mech, you just kind of forget. Okay, so is this having an effect? Like, am I like 5 meters of range, like 2 meters of range? Is it fine? Not. And if you do like if you want to optimize that mech again, you still need to play it like for like 50 more matches, and like, all right, so no, I wanted those. I want those on my mech.
Yeah.
So
Now you got to grind
that's a
more. Yeah.
yeah,
And if you're a
that's a
new
problem.
player, that
Yes,
sucks. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
that's a problem. So they need to reduce the number of nodes significantly and kind of like compact it into less trees. Right
Do you,
now, for example, we have.
do you think every mech should have the same trees?
Mm,
Because if you're a player, you're always going to go down for cooldown, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, there are
yeah, I mean,
some
some
nodes that
nodes
are
are
always
really valuable.
yeah, and I guess that's what I'm going to is like, even if you go back to the old system, that was, I think, one of the core from like a balancing perspective is like, oh well, every mech has cooldown, heat containment. It's like, should it? You know, would you like to see that be different? Because I mean, that does, it's a bigger balance. It's more work to do it that way, but then that way you can micro control what percentages of, oh well, maybe this mech doesn't get any I don't know, whatever, as much or as many cooldown nodes because it's already strong or whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, I think unifying the skill tree across all the mechs is the best approach. Specializing can be done with the quirks.
Okay.
It would be less complicated, I think, and that's my personal opinion. Like, there might be like someone that can come with a better design that can like kind of have mechs with different trees working. But even then, you could have different percentages for those nodes for different classes, because right now we have like armor and structure nodes which have different percentages. Like, I've seen the files. You can basically define a node to have even different percentages for a certain chassis. So that can be something. But unifying the number of skill nodes and how many skill nodes a mech can invest in that skill tree I think would be the best approach.
Gotcha.
And then like reducing the number of nodes, reducing the dependencies on things that are not really dependent on each other, would allow more kind of like specialized way of play earlier
Yeah.
in your gameplay without going through this puzzle.
And let me just clarify, I guess, too, when I made that statement, I think it's also too is like, if you already have a really good mech that is the Mark II Bravo, like, it's like, okay, well, of course you're going to go down for the cooldown. My question from a balance perspective is like, do you want that to happen? Like, you're already making, like, the good mech is now getting more, right, of something that makes it even more lethal. Just to clarify, I guess my issues too with the skill tree is like, I don't like the fact of some of it unlocks equipment or makes it work at the base level. Like ECM, I don't like the fact of you have to unlock nodes to make this piece of equipment work, right? To me, that just, it's sort of counterintuitive. I like, and that's why I was asking about the like, imagine on the Raven 3L, like, it has ECM nodes, and maybe it's to boost its, like, base range, like, it should just work, and then you can, oh well, it's a specialized, then it can get more range, or it can hold locks for, all that stuff. I just feel like that's, I guess, where it could be unique if you did individualized, or I guess, we've got Quirks, but I just don't like the fact of like, this piece of equipment is locked behind this skill tree and so forth. Are you concerned? I mean, from the min-maxing standpoint, I think that was one of the concerns too, is like, because nodes are just nodes, you just will ignore. Like, right now, there are tree, like, as I joke, jump jet tree or whatever. You never really use it. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like, so, yeah, and then also, like, is range versus cooldown versus duration, which is more important for the players out there. And if you condense that, does it make some just even more go-to than others, right? So
yeah, I mean, there's always min-maxing. Like the purpose of a skill tree is about min-maxing basically. And I mean, as you said, some of the nodes are just unnecessary. Like for example, ECM, you've already paid the tonnage and slot price for that equipment. Like it doesn't need to be behind something else to work, because if you don't have those nodes, you might as well not have the ECM, because everyone's going to detect you from 700 meters. So what's the point?
Yeah.
And like some of the passive effect nodes, like sensor range, like data acquisition, target retention, like seismic sensor, those things can still be like on the skill tree. Like some things can go. I mean, ECM, as you said, is not necessary. Jump jets doesn't need to have like 5 levels of 3% incremental changes. And
how do you feel about cool shots and
cool
RD and
shots,
airstrikes being a
I
part
mean,
of it?
I think that if they want to change something, they need to limit mechs to 1 strike. Because right now, everyone, like if you have 2 on your mech, it's just strike spam everywhere. And because of how deadly the strikes are, sometimes like you get destroyed like with a single strike, and that's the match for you. Like it's even worse for light mechs.
Yeah.
Sometimes for airstrikes, like sometimes you don't see the smoke because how the airstrike works, and then boom, you're gone.
Yeah.
And it doesn't end. Like it continues till the end of the match, because everyone has 2 and just spams them around. There's also another aspect to it, is that when you have 2, you have 2 chances of screwing up a perfect strike from another player, because you just want to get some cheap damage around the corner or a single mech.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what comes into like having multiple strikes on a mech. I think UAVs are something that is good to have 2, because it doesn't have a direct effect on your mech's performance. Like in the damage output, it's a passive information tech.
Sure.
It's good to have 2 UAVs, like scouting mechs, specifically like in competitive play. Sometimes scouting mechs has 2 UAVs, and it's very valuable. Cool shot, I mean, it's not a big deal as strikes are, because strikes have a direct effect
Sure.
on the fight. But yeah, I mean, we have 4 capture assist nodes. Why do we have 4?
Yeah.
Like it's just 1 node. Like, is your mech is going to be capture assist mech or no? Like, well, what is this? Like, you have 4 nodes. You have 2 narc nodes. Like, okay, so have 1, balance the values, and have 1. Like, why do you have like this much clutter?
Yeah.
And like unify some of the trees. Like jump jets and mobility are kind of the same thing. Like just have a mobility
I
tree.
feel like jump jets just should be removed from that anyways, and just make
Yeah, I
jump jets
mean,
better,
basically,
right?
yeah.
Like,
I mean, you
yeah.
don't really
Yeah.
need the jump jets, and that like I have something to say about like some of those quirks as well. But yeah, jump jet tree is not something necessary. Like I don't think I have jump jet nodes on any of my mechs. Like
I don't have any.
perhaps on 2 like really specialized mechs
Yeah.
for competitive play, but not
Yeah.
like that's basically it. 2
Yeah.
out of like 600 mechs.
Yeah.
And like from the survival tree, like again, it's just a maze. Like you have
Would you
you
agree
have
though?
mhm.
Like I was asking Nutty. I almost feel like, how many of your trees look exactly the same or are exactly the same?
Most of them.
Most.
Most of them.
So it's a false sense of
Yeah.
choice, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it is. It's like saying, like, hey, you get to quirk out your mech, but I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really. I mean, so
Yeah, I mean,
then if we're talking about it, it's not really a tree of choice. It's
yeah,
more of just a, if you know what you're doing.
leveling up. It's a
Yeah, and
leveling
so
up
like then
system. Yeah.
then why have choice in it? Why not just basically have a system that, hey, as you hit certain XP increments, you're going to unlock these bonuses, and then you never have to worry about clicking. You just automatically get this. I mean, why not just make it easy for everybody? Like, why even have that? You know,
hmm I mean, for competitive play, you can see like vastly different trees because the roles. Like only one mech needs to have something. The rest can kind of feed off that, and then like capture assist is really important on some of the mechs. Like you might not need heat generation nodes on some of the like AC like ballistic centered mechs. You perhaps is better off with survival trees.
sure.
Sometimes you don't need survival tree. You need like maximum mobility, but it all comes down to like really min maxing your mech for the role
Sure.
it's gonna play. For solo play, most of the skill tree for solo play look the same.
Yeah.
Honestly, at least for my
Yeah.
in my case,
I also feel
unless
like,
it's really different. Yeah, it's a
yeah,
different build, but most of it is the same. Yeah.
I also feel like what a knockdown effect that I don't think is ever really talked about, but go back to when the skill tree first came out is mobility. The idea that you're having to choose, well, I'm going to go firepower on like a direwolf, survivability, and oh well, do you need to worry about operations? I feel like what happened is it took the legs out from underneath a lot of mechs that they were on equal footing beforehand. All the mechs, you know, with the skill tree of the set of 8 and then, you know, elite and master. And who's going to choose the entire mobility tree to get maybe mobility that the direwolf needs? Because again, a fast moving heavy or whatever doesn't have to worry because it's not as big and blocky. Does that make sense? I mean, are you seeing where I'm getting to? Like, I feel
Yep.
like that's also another contributing factor is like when the skill tree came in, this idea of choice, and because to get the mobility stats back, well, you're never going to choose, I don't know how many nodes, 40 nodes versus, oh, well, I go firepower. And then the argument is, well, you're making that choice. Well, no, because the base mobility for heavies and mediums is going to be higher. So then, and again, it sort of goes back to that statement I made earlier, which is I feel like assaults, because really that's probably the weight class I think is fallen off the most. I feel like assaults, for the most part, except for your Mark IIs and your Death Strikes at the time, and this or that, the ones that can move at a decent clip of speed and have a better profile, you see
Yep.
you see these similarities of why mechs do well and some don't. But like I just feel like so many assault mechs and are just they're it's a how do I put this? It's you not because they're vulnerable. They are a hindrance to your team. They're more of a. There's a word for it. I'm just it's blanking. They're a hindrance to your team, and they're going to be taken out. I can't think of the word right now, but it's like they're. It's like a negative connotation because you have the mech, basically. There's a word in my head I just can't think of. I'll probably think about it like 3 o'clock in the morning, wake up and be like, that's what it was. But yeah. So yeah, I think skill tree affected the game across the board, and I don't think it's talked about enough. I mean, I don't know, man. Like I also just question is that system good for MWO in the first place? Like, is it a good fit? Like, because what you just suggested is going to mean reduction of nodes across the board. Good. Less clicks, easier, no gatekeeping, blah, 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 whatever. You're still going to have to refund all of that XP, which goes back to that's going to be the problem. Well, then my question is that still the best system? Because if you're going to have to do that, is that a good route? Is there something better for MWO outside of this skill tree? You know, like it would be the time to explore that, right? Because if you're going to have to revert the XP anyways.
Yeah, I mean, there are other alternatives. Like as I remember back then, when skill tree was going to come out, an expanded version of like what they were going for at the time. Like some mechs had like 2 or 3 weapon modules, like two kind of like one master module and like 2 sensor modules, and you can just like you could buy those modules. Like everyone would basically was going for seismic and radar deprivation
Yeah.
back in the day, and like some range and that sort of stuff. I mean, some people were like I've seen some ideas back then. I might not really remember them. That to wanted them to expand on that system, like but at the end of the day, it just becomes like a skill tree with less nodes. Um, like um, I also remember when they initially released the skill tree, every weapon had its own tree. Like
Yeah.
large pulse laser had its
Yeah.
own, medium pulse laser or pulse laser, I think. Pulse laser
You're
had
right.
their own,
Yeah. Yeah.
lasers had their own, Gauss rifles had their own. It was too much, and they kind of unified them all into something. I th- mm,
You know, be
I don't know. Mm,
go ahead.
go ahead.
Uh,
Yeah, I think like one of the things that they can do, like again, I'm remembering my thoughts from like 3 years ago, that they can kind of specialize the weapon tree. Like for example, when you go into the it needs redesigning, of course. If you when you go to the weapon tree, you're presented with like missile, ballistic, energy. And like ballistics, you don't really need cooldown nodes in ballistic. You can have like the cooldown nodes for ballistics, but with less effect, less number of them. And like that can focus on things like more ammo, that can focus on like more critical damage, more velocity, and that sort of things that necessarily doesn't increase your damage output because it's already maxed out what you can put in a Madcat 2B. I'm not saying not at all, but like you can control like the amount that they give. And then you have the energy tree, which you can put all your like heat generation quirks there, heat generation nodes there, like range nodes there, duration nodes there, and kind of specializing for the weapon that you need. And then you have missiles, like you can have like spread nodes or just one spread node basically, and then um, I guess like missile critical damage, like missile velocity, or I don't know if it's a good idea to have different velocities for different weapons, or have something like a universal thing. But that is something that I remember I was thinking about back then. I never made a post. I never like kind of like went on it. I was
Yeah.
like, okay, so this is the game. I just play it.
Yeah.
Uh, like they could go for something like that, and they could like balance the game using that,
Sure.
so that it's not really like a min max thing. It's
Yeah.
more based on like also what you have on your mech. They
Yeah.
can go with mobility as well. That sort of approach rather than like this general like puzzle.
Yeah. I've talked about the skill tree, like, I think with Mike about it, where he was basically saying I'd just revert it back to the old way. And a part of me also asked the question is there are people that left the game because of skill tree. We know
Yep.
that.
Yep.
And the amount of comments I get in the YouTube channels when doing podcasts is like, yeah, that I have no interest. That I think that should play a part of the discussion, right? Because like
hmm I have
the
something else on that. I have something else on that too, because when
sure,
the skill tree hit, it wasn't the only thing in the package. Many of the weapons in the game were being hit by the nerf hammer
nerf. Yeah, they got nerfed. Yeah,
because of the skill tree.
yeah,
It's like, all right, so
yeah,
we're giving you the skill tree, so we're gonna nerf this weapon.
yeah,
You want it back? Well, grind
yeah.
away.
You want that
So
10% back? Yeah, you got to get it in the tree. Yeah,
yeah, so it was people were like, all right, so you just made my mechs worse, and I have to work for it again.
yeah,
And because the initial version of the skill tree was so specialized per weapon, that meant, all right, so you had those historic skill points that you got from if your mech was mastered before, and there's another thing. Back then, you didn't need to master a mech to get the +2 multiplier for the basic level. So you could have a mech that was not mastered, but was already on max performance. And when they translated into skill tree, that translated into like 50 something skill nodes, not 95,
Yeah.
not 91 nodes.
Yeah.
And basically they were like, all right, so you made my mechs worse, and now I have to work for it to bring it back. To some of them might even not be the same level at compared to what they were before.
Yeah.
So they're like, I'm not gonna bother. I'm just gonna leave.
Yeah.
And that was the main thing, because clicking, I mean, yes, it's annoying, but at the end of the day, like if you want to play some mechs, like you just go through the clicking. And if you remember, first respecking a skill tree costed XP and C bills. Like you couldn't just like change nodes.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of things that were done, I think, wrong at the time that caused all this, like people leaving the game.
Yeah.
So a lot of that ties into those. And then there was another wave of nerfs. I think it was after Chris started working for PGI. Like that wave of nerf came in the middle of an MRBC season.
Yeah.
People were playing with the game. People were strategizing using mechs, and suddenly, like weapons were basically destroyed.
Yeah.
Like it was like, well, that mech's out a window.
Yeah.
So that was another wave.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there are multiple reasons like why people left the game, but yeah, those are the two major ones I remember.
Well, I mean, obviously, in the most recent, we have side torso heat spike. I would venture to say you would agree. Just get rid of it. That's what. Yeah. The mobility nerfs that we saw. Across the board. I mean, like the holding on to like the Timberwolf and the Dart. Well, like why aren't yeah, I agree. Let's see. I understand too on the side torso destruction. There is I think Bowser brought it up, which is he basically said is there is an issue with balance between standard lights and XLs and then clan standard and XLs, and it's 100% true. And because there's no other really mechanic behind, it's not like it's literally about tonnage savings and then how many crits. So maybe you can fit a heavy Goss or okay, well AC20s can now take LFEs. Like it's just one of those like. Outside of that, though, there are clear winners, especially when it comes to clan side. So I liked your guys' suggestion, which is like, okay, well, if they lose their side torso, just increase the mobility and heat dissipation a little bit more or whatever. But yeah, the initial spike, of course, no one likes. But
I think that's reasonable. Like just balance using the values that are not punishing out of control. Because when you're fighting, you lose a side torso. Because you're in the fight, it's most probably you're heat capped. Like that's usually the case. And when someone destroys your torso, you either shut down or you cook yourself. So you're dead basically. So that's
you're already
something.
Yeah, you lose a side torso in a fight, you're already going to be moving slower. Your heat efficiency is going to go to shit too because you just lost out. Like you're already hurt. Like you don't need to just. It's like getting. It's like. Hammer and then the freaking anvil falls on you. It's like how much are you trying to penalize the player? Like what is there anything in particular that you feel pretty passionate? Well, okay, well I guess let's talk about rescale here. How would rescale be at your top of your list for MWO?
It needs development. Possibly some animations need to be done. Some additional animations need to be done if rescale was on the table. Also, I just want to mention something. Like PGI said that they did volumetric scaling. I don't know if they made a mistake somewhere. Because I have all the models, all the mech models, and I can 100% say that when you transition from 30 tons to 35 tons, the volume more than doubles.
Yeah.
That's not how volume and mass works.
Well, yeah, there was something weird off. Yeah.
I 100%, because I think Russ was said that we did like a pixel by pixel calculation, like a script that calculated the volume of a mesh.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that script has a bug.
So
because
yeah, you're an electrical engineer, but you're still an
Mhm.
engineer. What is the fascination with just because it's heavier means it's bigger? What do you think that is with the mech fans? Like,
I guess most of it comes from that. All right, so these mechs, they're made from the same materials, like internals, and the armor is the same material. I obviously you cannot like change the size of the mech when you choose between ferro and standard armor, but more or less they're made from the same material. Like as the mech gets bigger, the engine gets bigger, more or less on the same ratio. So they're like, all right, so we can assume that the density of these mechs are the same.
gotcha.
So that's why we could, because at the end of the day, if everything was realistic, of course, like no two mechs would be built the same. Like there may be like empty spaces inside one mech, like leg or arm or torso, which is basically nothing. Or some mech might have been built like in a more compact way. Like there's lots of things like this in lore. Like this chassis has gone through like difficulties in design. They had to compact that component. They had to make that component smaller. There's lots of lore stories behind that.
Yeah.
But from the gameplay perspective, I guess it should be a balance between pure volumetric, because in Reloaded, it's pure volumetric. And I understand that some of those might not kind of look right. As like as you look at them, it's like, all right, so yes, I guess I can see it that yeah, the volume, like this mech is like more fat, like it has more chunky legs and arms. It contributed to the total volume of the mech
because the design was done that way, ergo
yeah
that's the side effect. Like it's not I mean, and we've seen so many mechs like that. I mean, the Fafnir is a great example where it's like yes, it's supposed to potentially look like this. I mean, whoever did the original concept, Mech 4 and all that, but like from a gameplay perspective, it can be hugely detrimental for mechs to have those proportions.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like the Fafnir, like the top portion of the body is basically a cube. And that's usually gives you like a large volume. Like it's because like mechs like for example the grasshopper, the upper body is more like slim, and it's not just a giant cube on top of something. So there's like less volume to work with. So it in the volumetric scaling it becomes bigger.
Yeah.
And a mech like a Fafnir for a 100-tonner, it should be way smaller than it is, because even if you want to go with volumetric scaling, that concept even kind of more proof that it needs to be like smaller than it is right now, because volume wise the Fafnir and the King Crab are the two most gigantic mechs in the game in terms of volume. I think followed by the Direwolf and the Kodiak. So
I mean,
it's
to me, it's just a gameplay thing. Like, okay, so the grasshopper is skinny, and okay, if it shrunk down, it might be, like really, really good. Or I mean, so to me, it's just like use your base. I mean, the I've told people again, like look at a flea, and then look at a wolfhound or cougar or Jenner. That's only like you're talking about 5 tons, 10 tons, 15, but yet it's like 5 times the size of the flea for a light. And you wonder why those mechs, I mean, that's the thing is like what we're suggesting here, rescale, is it's almost a buff to every single mech out there, because, and also too, the fact of it's going to help alleviate the fact of pinpoint accuracy, which is one of the problems in I shouldn't say it's not a problem in MWO. It's not a problem in MWO. It's a feature. It's supposed to be there. And I wouldn't want RNG factors messing with that. Like, oh, if you aim and then you got some reticle, you know, I don't. But the fact of the mechs themselves, the 3D models, were not designed for a pinpoint environment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the rescale, I think it should be somewhere between the volumetric scale, so that it looks right. Like, because as you said, when you look at a flea and you look at the wolfhound, you're like, is it 20 tons? Is it that one is 35 tons? That doesn't look right.
Looks like a 50 ton or a 55 ton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it has to be started like based on the volumetric model, and then if it needs adjustment, if it needs to get a smaller, if it needs to get bigger, go from there. But right now, the models above, like with 35 tons and above, they are way bigger than what they should be, even if you go with pure volumetric scaling.
Yeah.
And I think like fixing that issue on itself can like can at least makes gameplay somewhat more lasting. Like you can't basically core an atlas with like six mechs in a firing line like in an instant.
Yeah.
And then coupled with the mobility boosts, as I'm hoping to see, you can have a chance. Like on that mobility, I don't know, like if how we are on the time, but on the mobility issue, I've checked the pre-desync and after desync data.
Doesn't line up, does it?
Yeah, from I think up to Bloodass back in 2018, because that's where I stopped doing everything regarding like Mechwarrior Online because of reasons.
Yeah.
Back then, and then it's
so you're
surprising.
saying pre-desync?
Yeah, pre-desync. Like it's surprising because pre-desync, the acceleration of mechs was not nerfed as much as people think.
Yeah.
Like with the new mobility, like there are lots of mechs that are better off with acceleration stats. However, they annihilated all the mechs in terms of deceleration. The mechs don't stop.
Yeah.
It's so bad. And
well, it's interesting because I'm the one who did the initial Quirks. Chris took over. He was the one doing the engine desync, which I always argue, people are like, I hate the engine desync. I'm like, I don't think you really understand what's going on. Engine desync was a good idea. Good idea. The execution was not good, which means like the Locust, I think at the point in time, the Locust had something stupid like 140% Excel DXL. Like I gave it that because you needed to be able to do these things.
Yep.
That 140 was not rolled back into the mech. I know I didn't do the numbers.
Yeah.
Someone else did. And the result is where we are, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and then because the change was not uniform, okay, so you can take a mech. Okay, so this mech accelerates the same as before, but it's so sluggish. Why? Because it doesn't stop, because in a Locust, acceleration is only half the story. If you're not able to stop right away, like, or really quickly, you're still going to be predictable and you're still going to get shot. Like there's the whole like stepping back and forth thing goes away. And because the turn speed of the mech is tied to the velocity that is going at the moment, if you cannot stop quickly, your turn rate is going to be slower as well. Like sometimes you just need to stop, turn around, and go another way, or just stop and turn back and go back or run from something. That takes so much time, like to just stop, turn. Like previously, you could do that really quickly, and that's why I think right now mechs feel really kind of vulnerable, because right now, if you commit to a fight, there's no going back.
Yeah, there's
because
no.
There's no.
Yeah,
Yeah. think mobility. I think the people that we have in that like Gulag server have kind of like already gone through a lot of chassis, like revising some of them, like like asking for opinions. But yeah, lots of things needs to change. Another thing, torso pitch level for most mechs, it's out of this world. The Firestarter, like it's 15 degrees, like it's nothing.
Yeah,
The
that's nothing.
Kodiak,
Yeah,
the Kodiak is 15 degrees, and I remember Chris was saying that the hitbox, there was some hitbox problems, but at the time we were like, okay, so fix it.
yeah.
I mean, PGI needs to fix that, right? And
I
well,
I can
talking this to
understand.
PGI.
I can understand pitch and yaw angle being a balance mechanism for like, I sort of equate this to a regular tank with a turret and a tank destroyer, right? Whereas the tank destroyer, very limited amount of, you know what I'm saying? Like the idea that like that would be if you have a mech that has a lot of frontal firepower, I can understand it's got a slower torso twist. I like from a bounce perspective. I can understand like if you had like theoretically you had a mech like you wanted to use that. The problem is not everybody uses the mech in that fashion as far as a min-maxed as well. And so if you hammer that particular thing, you're really potentially just hurting the chassis from ever being used again and or by everyone across the board. But like and also too, like Kodiak 3s came out and we all knew it was going to be OP as shit because of where the hard points were. Like we knew, like, so to me, that falls back to Alex Iglesias and really doing a better, and this isn't like a critique. It's just like having gameplay in mind when you're doing stuff like that, because like as soon as you do that, it invalidates, I mean, from 100 tonners, it invalidated at the time. Then also we found out the UACs were broken. I mean, the Direwolf could do it, but it couldn't do it as well as the Kodiak, and then all that. So yeah.
I mean, torso yaw and torso pitch are also tied into scale and mobility, because like when a mech doesn't have enough yaw, like imagine if a mech has like 90 degrees of yaw angle, that mech can move like perpendicular to your position and still have guns on you. And the movement itself is some sort of defense mechanism against you firing at it, because it's more mobile. Like you have to lead your shots, like and that sort of thing. And if it doesn't have yaw, in order for that mech to be able to fire at you, it needs to move like in a more straight line. Like at least a component of the movement vector would be more towards you, and it's easier to shoot it. And it's kind of like it comes back to like how easy it is to pick off components off something. Like for example, the Direwolf. The Direwolf, because the weapon mounts are low, you have to commit to something. Like there's no like peeking and reach peeking, corner peeking with the Direwolf. It's a big like turret. It's a gunboat. And like the first thing a gunboat should have is turret mobility. Is that all right? So that thing it doesn't have enough mobility, like to get to places. At least give it a way to kind of minimize.
Would you standardize that across the board? Is that like?
I would say.
Would that be a problem? Like really think about it. Like if all, you know what I'm saying? Like if angle and torso twist, like for assaults.
I use 90. I use 90 degrees as a baseline. Like 90 degrees as a baseline. At least 90 degrees as a baseline to give this basic ability to the mechs to maximize a maneuver into their advantage, which is basically moving in like 90 in a 90 degree different vector.
Because like I know we play in a weird game that has so many variables, but like if you were to say, okay, let's talk about that the Victor, you're saying the Direwolf was going to have the same mobility? Yeah, because the Direwolf is still going to be a much larger, easy target. Like even if you do rescale, it's still going to be bigger mech. So that's the natural negative built in, right? And I think that sort of
I mean, The Kodiak, apart from the UAC 10s being broken, Kodiak has one weakness, and it's huge front-facing like barn door. So you cannot miss the Kodiak from any distance. Like if it was not for that high, like hard
Mounts,
points
yeah.
on the high mounts, it's really a gigantic mech. I mean,
the Atlas equivalent, just with high
yeah,
mounts.
it's the Atlas equivalent.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess some nerfs to the Kodiak 3 was warranted. I mean, even not that. I mean, they balanced the UAC 10s. Like right now, you cannot fire 4 UAC 10s at all. Like you just cook yourself. And then the rest of the builds also have been dealt with as well. Like Gauss and PPCs
Yeah.
cannot be fired at the same
Well,
time. And
throw on the Kodiak itself got hit by engine desync because someone didn't give it the mobility back. And then on top of that, the new skill tree then took away the mobility again.
Yep.
So yeah, you wonder again why these mechs are just, I mean, and that's where I'm going to ask you about Quirks, because I feel very strongly, because I initiated it. The majority of Quirks still out there are because of what I input. Some of them had been altered, some have been updated, and I like the updated stuff. Like the HSL stuff is really cool, or a family quirk as well. I think there's been some good stuff additions. But when I was going through that, and after a while, I saw issues with it, because what I saw was, yeah, you may have just buffed that heavy or medium or whatever, like the Hunchback 4G or whatever. But when you just blanket like that Thunderbolt, the Tall Man and all that, like you've got a mech that's more compact than an Assault, has more structure, it's already got it's faster mobility. So you're also still just basically invalidating everything above it because you've given it this power creep. And that's one of the things I recognized, and I remember trying to get, like, I got to a certain point that I was like, I think we need to wipe the slate, like wipe it clear and go in there with a little bit better rubric, like, and I could say that, like a system in place. And it's so difficult because it's like, what mech, what weight class, where are the hard points, where are they located, I mean, there's so many things when it comes to that. But like Quirks in general have been, I think it was a fun point in time, but I do think it swung too hard, because people are like, I have a problem when people are asking for buffs on the Direwolf, Quirks on the Direwolf. I have a problem with that. I'm not saying that it doesn't deserve it. What I'm saying is, why not look below it? Like, why is the Direwolf, you know what I'm saying? Like, obviously the mobility stuff we just talked about, but I have concerns with power creep just basically happening, all over again.
Yeah, I mean, some of the I mean, there are different quirks. Like some of the quirks that the Direwolf gets are kind of suitable to the chassis. For example, right now the Direwolf Prime gets armor quirks in side torsos and like the center torso. And obviously that's because if you have those torsos, that means all your weaponry are going to be in the arms, and those arms are just gorilla arms, like low slung, and that means you need more exposure to fire your weapons. And like more exposure in the Direwolf is that there's no turning back. Like you either die or you kill. And those are good quirks. There's also another side of it, which is weapon quirks. Like I understand some of the weapon quirks are made to make like certain chassis from like overtly exploiting like a certain weapon system. Like for example, ghost heat on medium lasers, or I don't know, ER medium lasers, because it's a 1-ton weapon. Like imagine if it didn't have ghost heat. Like you take something with like 10 of them and just go one shot everyone in the back. Like all you need is one shot and there's no penalty. There was like, it was initially I think introduced to counter the 6 PPC stalker, And Stalker was already a good mech in terms of like hardpoint placement, the shape of the torso, and it could move its torso with a relatively fast pace. So it could get around,
Yeah.
and it could like slap you in the face, and that's 60 point of damage gone.
Yeah.
So I think that came into place. However, some of the other weapon systems, um, kind of placing that limitation was a little bit too harsh for some weapon systems. Like tying some weapon system to others
Sure.
was harsh on like some mechs. Like right now, we have the heat scale limit quirk
Yeah.
that they've
HSL. Yeah.
HSL quirk that they introduced, and I think it's a really good quirk because basically it allows you to kind of like mitigate the negative effect that like
Yeah.
required balancing like ghosting. I think it was a required balancing mechanic, but it had negative effects. And
Yep.
this new quirk is something that can be used
Yeah.
extensively
King
to kind of
Crab needs HSL.
yes
Yeah. Yeah.
mitigate
AC
that
20s.
effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and also the jump jet quirk, like the Vapor Eagle, like out of all mechs, Vapor Eagle has the jump jet quirks. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, there's a whole lot of 35-ton mechs, 30-ton mechs, and
Yeah.
like smaller mechs that have half power jump jets, because because the 12 jump jet spider was breaking off the out of bound level from the top of some level, so you just destroyed that jump jet for an entire line of mechs. Well, you have this quirk that you just introduced.
Yeah.
How about doing something with it? Because on the Vapor Eagle, yeah, it's good, but the Vapor Eagle didn't need it
Yeah.
like uh, like that. I mean, it's a positive that it has it, but don't take it away. But still, just apply it to some of the mechs that really need it. For
Yeah.
example, Jump Jet also has another issue, which is the power versus tonnage.
Yeah.
Like right now, like from the lighter one, like class fives to class fours, the tonnage is the same, but the power suddenly doubles
Yeah.
when you go to the 40 tonners. And when it changes to when the tonnage doubles, the power stays the same. So you're paying double the tonnage, and it's not a percentage, it's an absolute value, because when you're paying double on like 4 jump jets, the result would be 2 extra tons.
Yeah.
And then the power stays the same, but you're paying double tonnage. And
Yeah.
it gets worse into assault mix, something like a Highlander. Like a Victor can jump reasonably with 4 jump jets or 3 jump jets. But when the tonnage doubles, when it goes to the next class, well, the power stays the same.
Yeah.
And suddenly on a 90-ton max, you need to pay double the tonnage to get the same amount of lift. That is something that I
Well,
think needs to be addressed.
that all started too back in Pop Tart. Now, I was talking about this, which is
Hmm.
like Paul coming down on the Nerf hammer because he wanted to quell the behavior. Started this. Like, I get it too. Like, you don't want a mech getting the same benefits with 1 jump jet as 5 jump jets, but we've never been in that position that you've wanted to take 5. I always wondered too, like, what happens if if a mech had jump jets, those were locked in, like, sort of like the Omni ones where they're sort of locked in. Then you could buff the shit out of them and be like, yeah, those mechs get the I don't know. But yes, 100% jump jets need reworked. I feel like another suggestion I've heard, which is the recharge time, if it was tied into the amount of jump jets you had, would help too. Because, like, okay, you want a Pop Tart, you're going to want as max jump jets as you want so you can keep, doing that behavior. Because if you only take 1, you'll have that initial lift, but then you're going to have to wait a long time, which is the purpose of like having 1 on an assault or 1 on a, whatever. Is it's not there to be an offensive thing. It's there to generally is to get over an obstacle really quick that's in your way, Canyon Network and so forth. So I think that would be a good addition. Yeah. Have you had any thoughts as far as improving, like, outside of that?
No, I mean that makes sense because along with the jump jets, there has been like other changes as well to kind of like nerf the pop tarting behavior. There has been an upgrade in the firepower the mechs can bring out. So pop tarting is not as rewarding as it was
Yeah.
before.
There's
So you
counters now.
can
Yeah.
you can get punished way more compared to what it was before. And there's like reticle shake. The initial like popping was nerfed, so there was
Yeah.
not really
Broken in
because
hitboxes,
yeah
the
yeah
Timby. Oh my god, yeah. There's a few
yeah
mechs out there that still have some, I
yeah
think, some wonkiness. Like, yeah.
yes
But like people don't know what we're talking about too. You have to look at old videos. Like you could tap your jump jets, and the problem what it was is the hitboxes in your mech did this like head banging, and so if you're trying to, it was abused all the time. Like, and even
yeah
if you didn't have the head banging, just that hopping up and down for the hit reg and host state rewind and all of
yeah
that, your hitbox is doing this, and that's where the meme or that little animation of the Timby popping
yeah
on the all systems nominal. Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, there are lots of those changes were made, like the because jump jets right now, like they have two stages. Like there's a hop stats and there's a lift force stats. So the mech jumps by that hop distance and then continues upwards. That's why when you start jumping from the ground, you can jump higher
yeah,
compared to when you're falling and then you want to hit the jump jets. You're not getting
yeah, you're
higher
not going.
if
Yeah,
you do that. Yeah,
gravity. Yeah, it's just yeah, and
yeah.
that,
So
I know gravity plays actually into that as well. I think
yeah,
literally the
yeah.
setting or whatever. Yeah. So yeah.
So yeah,
Um,
there are other changes they have done to nerf the pop tarting, but I think jump jets need another pass.
yeah,
Either mitigated through quirks
sure.
or through raw stat changes
Yeah.
based on the
I
jump jet
think stat
class.
changes because like across the
Yeah,
board, it's just it.
yeah. You need to just put so many quirks across like all
Yeah,
mechs.
like that
Yeah,
that's a good example too. When someone would be like, um, when we were talking about Quirks too, is like, well, just buff the other. And it's like, hold on, like even when you look at Quirks back in the day, it's like, hold on, you had like you can buff 90% of mechs, or you could nerf 10%. Like that's a tough thing. That's a tough thing, right? Is like, oh man, negative Timby Wolf Quirks. Those were
yes.
interesting.
Those,
That was
like we had a direwolf like with negative head armor. So it's like,
yeah. Yeah, well, omnis are a weird thing too, and they've
yeah.
never, I don't think, fully been utilized. Like the omni mech system, it was like the first. It just never had iterations. Like I feel like it was close because for the most part, there are some mechs that some omnipods are really good, but then you have the
Yeah.
problem is 90% of the other pods are useless, and or you take like a summoner again that's locked with X amount of tonnage in the jump jets or another mech, then you can't really do anything with that. And but yeah, so I mean, to me, like the summoner should just be like a highly maneuverable, jump capable, where it gives it added, and it does have that because of quirks too and base stats. But
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, man, we've been
Yeah.
talking for 2.5 hours. I don't know if you
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah. That's a long.
We could probably just keep going. Is
Yeah.
there anything else that maybe that committee didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about? Is there anything that like has been really bugging Navid that you just want to get it off your chest about MWO? Like,
I think that podcast kind of like covered most of the things. The things that they did not get into specifics was like specific weapon quirks, like
sure.
which weapons
Sure.
need to be brought up, or like which weapons are good, like underperforming,
I
overperforming.
just hope they use
They're
a
all
panel. I hope Darren
yeah,
reaches out to you and whoever else, because I see you guys talking all the time.
yeah.
Why just have a panel of guys that says like, hey, this is our reason for it, and this is what just, yeah, make it so.
Yeah, I mean those panels, like even back in the old Gulag, that's like the community balance sheet, the argument were like this. Like it was exactly like this. Like someone agrees, someone disagrees. There's reason for that. There's reason for this. and it's all back and forth, and then the end result is like a collective
Yeah.
thing that
You
everyone
come in the
agrees on.
middle. Like, okay, we're not
Yeah.
going to go far this way. We're going to, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of like how it works. And
How do you
like
feel?
I
How
mean
do you feel about the monetization aspect?
the monetization. I think I've like posted about this on the forums as well. I think PGI should focus on people that are coming from like Mechwarrior 5 to Mechwarrior Online, or people that are just installing the game, getting into the game. Because I've seen quite a few, at least like in the past year, like a lot of new players, new streamers have come into the game, like started like learning stuff. Like I see like experienced players like hop into the chat, like tell them what to do, like yeah, grab this, this does that, and like play with them in the in like the soup queue, and kind of like bring them up to speed. But still, there's one aspect lacking in Mechwarrior Online, and that's okay. So this player wants to spend money on this game. So what are the options? Like, what's being offered? And right now, it's either mech packs, and it's only like one chassis, because the three chassis model is no longer in effect for a long time now. So usually you get mostly identical variants,
Yep.
or at least variants that you can do the same thing, at
Sure.
least on two of them.
Yeah.
And like the base pack, which is usually like $20, doesn't even come with any other goodies like premium time or like any other thing. It's just three chassis, like bone stock, green, everything. And there's also other packs that they have, like complete packs. The pricing is crazy.
Yeah.
Like there is like you get, for example, there's packs like the gargoyle. The pack is $65,
Yeah.
and it's like six gargoyles with like the hero included. Okay, so you're giving me six Omnimechs. I can just take the hero, and the rest can just sit there in my mech bay, or I can just sell them, all keep all the pods, because it's an Omnimech.
Yeah.
So why am I paying $65?
Yeah.
Like there's
And
no
and it's
balance.
not like they're giving you enough GSP or like skill.
Yes.
They should give you the skill point. One, I was surprised because I mean, if you're paying cash, like the whole idea about paying
Yeah.
cash, the argument could be made is like, oh well, the C bill grind. Well, you're buying the hero too. Like, yeah, it should
Yeah.
definitely be there. Yeah, At least,
Yeah.
I would even say it should be the full SP amount or half SP amount.
Yeah. I
I
mean
don't know how I feel about that.
some amount, so that you hit the ground running. Like when you're spending cash on a game. Like there's another problem is that like there's no option to kind of grab the buyer and bringing them in. It's always like huge prices.
Yeah,
They kind of repel
yeah,
players from buying into the game. Like players like, well, am I going to like play this game anymore like in 2 months?
yeah,
Am I going to get value out of that? Like like we still have like clan invasion packs for $240, and like, okay, so am I going to play this game to match that amount? So
yeah.
it
That's a lot
repels
of money.
player.
Yeah,
Yeah, it repels players, and the options that are reasonable often don't contain enough.
yeah,
Like I think they seriously need starter packs, like
yeah. Oh yeah,
something.
yeah,
Yeah, something that a new player comes in and like, all right, so I'm gonna spend $20 on this game, and I want like the amount of things that are in the pack to make my account look like I've been playing for 6 months, or I've been playing for 4 months. So C bills, XP, GSP,
yeah,
like a bunch of mechs, like selected mechs with
yeah.
built like setups.
That's also
Because mhm,
no. That's also why I was talking about like skill tree earlier. That I don't think the current skill tree fits because, and this goes towards new players. They're gonna come in, and right now they literally can waste millions of C bills because they don't know.
yep,
Where like, and you can have a tutorial on it, but not everybody does tutorials. So to me, the system has to be intuitive enough, and then it says, okay, well, if this penalizes the new players coming in, then we just need to change it entirely. So I don't mean to segue, but it sort of talks about the new player experience when you're talking about mech packs of having value of and trial mechs. And, you know, obviously I talked to Darren on this last podcast, and I think it's a no-brainer, right? Like reaching out to individuals like Jay-Z or anybody really that's playing a game. They're gonna come up with good builds, rotate them in every 2 months or every month. Probably not every month, probably every 2 months, quarter or something like that. New trial mechs, but you know, I just feel like again it goes back to do everything you can to set the player up for success, like because. Funny enough, my background is teaching. So, and when you're explaining to anyone about a game, one of the biggest factors for them enjoying, coming back, watching is success. And that doesn't necessarily mean scoring points or whatever. The success could be that's a factor, but like knowing the rules, knowing the strategies, knowing the tactics, understanding you know, the dynamics between gameplay and different positions and stuff. So like if right now the players just aren't set up for success, and so many games suffer from this. EVE Online that I played for years had huge, and still to some extent there's a lot better, but like this game is so penalizing, especially with having cadets in matches with people like me and you. Like that just shouldn't happen, right? Yeah.
And I mean, new players, I mean, there's another aspect to the balancing as well. Like, what's the most iconic mechs in BattleTech? Like when someone comes into Mechwarrior Online, it's like, oh, it's cool. Like I've never known this game
the Atlas, right? Yeah.
I never known this game existed. Like this is great. Like these mech models, they look amazing. Like they're modernized, and they all know the Timberwolf. They all know the Atlas. It's like, oh, it's great. Like the best clan mech, like in the lore, like is the Timberwolf. I'm gonna buy it. You think that player is gonna have a good time? No, it's just gonna get wrecked in the Timberwolf, and that leaves a bad taste to the new player. And there's not like you can go back. You just blew all your cadet bonus CBOs on this spec, so you're stuck with it.
They need to be given a mech or a handful of mechs, in my opinion. And it doesn't have to be the end all be all, but like it should be a pretty decent medium or heavy. Like they should, or one of each weight class. And I don't even think that would be crazy. Like, and give them the additional 4 extra mech base.
Yeah, I mean, they can even implement like some lore aspect to it. Like some of the PvPs I've seen, like they can start you off. Like I think they've tried it something like this with Solaris, but not it's I think it's a half done thing. You can get sponsors. Sure. Like at least like make that like, all right, so I'm gonna stick with I don't know, like Clan Jade Falcon, and play like this bunch of games, like this, complete these objectives, like monthly objectives, like daily objectives, and for that they offer me a summoner, and that it can be like a limited number, like for example three of these, like not limited to 3 but choices, like 3 different factions that you can choose and like complete these like challenges, and then they give you a mech. Well, here's a mech, like because like you've been a good pilot, like you've been loyal, and here's a summoner, like here's a victor, like I don't know, like here's an awesome, like with like pre-built like setup on it. So this is something that can keep the player like coming back, logging into the game again, like checking stats. Because right now they have achievements, but I mean,
they don't mean anything.
Sometimes you don't even forget they exist. Like, they're like, all right, so they're like, okay, so here's 1,000 GXP. Okay, so what should I do with it? Okay, that's that's another aspect. They can kind of like enrich the initial experience,
Yeah.
at least, like the first 2 months, the player needs to feel like, oh, like everything is engaging. After that, well, it's PvP. Just let the player loose on solo queue and everything else.
Gotcha. Well, man, I think we're gonna wrap it up.
Yep.
I think we've
Yep.
been
It's
we're gonna have to do
closing
this
in on
again.
3 hours.
Like I feel like
Yeah.
we're gonna have to sit down, especially as things move forward and things happen. And I just want to say thank you again, man. Obviously face reveal. Now, when are you gonna start streaming? When's that gonna happen?
I don't think I would have like the time for streaming. I think people have seen me in MechCon, but not like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, um, it's been good. I mean, I'm very glad that
Yeah.
at least like I got a camera and I kind of came in for this podcast, and yeah, I really appreciate it because I think this new like thing that you're doing, I think it's gonna have a positive effect. Like the getting like the community to just come in, like talk about what they want, what
Yeah.
they love.
Yeah.
It's I think it's a really positive thing. Yeah.
Oh, and like I said, even from the topic of like 8v8 is like questioning people like, why do you feel that way? Or
Hmm.
are we missing something? The only way you can do that is by having a conversation and getting into those, details. Whether or not you spend 30 minutes talking about skill tree, it doesn't matter. It's the fact of maybe something in there, just even if it's just a small piece, it's like, oh yeah, that's a good nugget.
Hmm.
We're going to save that. So yeah, man, I just want to say thank you again for putting in the work on all of the stuff behind the scenes for MWO in the Gulag. Like I said, there's a Discord for those that don't know. It's special place for misfits and all that.
Yeah.
But these guys are going back and forth all the time. So they're basically working on weapon stats, mobility stats, new player. I mean, it's all the proposals that Ash and Navid and them did, but basically getting fine tuned. So
It's all Bearclaw's fault.
yeah,
It's all Bearclaw's.
when Darren's like, hey, let's do this, they can present the information and PGI then can act, right? And of course, they're just one group of, I think there's a few others as well, but also your work on Mechwarrior 5. I look forward to seeing what you do. And I'm looking forward to, Mech Mercenaries, obviously biasly, but like some of the things that, you've done has inspired like the conversation of, hey, how about we do this? How about we do that? And obviously a lot of people enjoy your mods because they download them and they're the top downloaded. So there's got to be some pride there. Yeah, man, I look forward to seeing what you come up with, and we'll have to do this again. I think it was a good conversation. I feel like I probably missed so much because like there's just not enough time. So let's do this again. Thank you again. And are any parting words, any shout outs before we sign off here?
No, I mean, thanks for having me, and I hope to see you and other players in Mechwarrior Online. And play against and with you.
Awesome.
And, yep, that's it.
Well, there you go, guys. That's Navid A. By the way, what does A1 stand for?
I don't know. It's something like back then. Just I don't even remember. Like I made an account for like Battlefield Bad Company 2.
Uh-huh.
It kind of stuck with me, so it's like, well, that's how it is.
That works. Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand. Well, man, thank you again for being on here. I hope to talk to you soon. So thank you.
Yep.
And
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Did you guys enjoy this podcast with Navid? I think that was a amazing conversation. I feel like I probably missed a few things, but overall that was super insightful, and it's awesome to see his face again. I have met him at MechCon, obviously a few times, but like I said, again, quick shout out to Navid for all you do in the community, of course, for being a guest here, taking the time out of your weekend to do that. So thank you again, sir. And of course, if you did like this podcast, I am going to implore you, there's a like button. Click it, smash it, do it. This tells the YouTube algorithm that, well, it's good. It's good content. So if you like it, if you value it, click that like, just smash it. Just do it right now. Come on. It's all right. Anyways, just want to say this podcast is sponsored by you guys, the viewers, the listeners. this is my full-time thing. So here's the deal. Please consider supporting a variety of ways. Come hang out on Twitch, right? I stream Monday through Friday, 12 to 6 p.m. And of course, sometimes on the weekends. But it's over at twitch.tv/NGNGTV. I'll have a link down below. Become a sub. Get access to emotes. Slow-mo doesn't affect you. All that fun stuff. There's a way. Become a patron. There's a few different levels as well. You can become a podcast sponsor as well. Speaking of sponsors, we have a sponsored stream next Friday from a unit and a group looking to support me and, of course, get their name out there. So we'll be doing that, of course, this coming Friday. So if you have a unit out there or you got an organization, you want some advertisement or stuff on either a Twitch stream and or a podcast, reach out to me on our Discord. It's a great way. All right. Also, if you do any shopping on Amazon, which everybody pretty much does, we have an affiliate associate link. All you gotta do is click through it. Doesn't add anything to your cost. I get kickbacks. That's how easy. Literally so easy a Hobbit can do it. I just want to say, if any of those options are available and you guys have the means, consider them. Just want to say thank you. Yeah. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that podcast. We have some very fun podcasts coming up soon. Mitch Gittleman from Hairbrain Schemes. We also have Blaine Lee Pardo. Yes, the author of Battletech novels is going to be on soon. So stay tuned for those. This was your local No Guts, No Galaxy Mechwarrior podcast. Signing off for tonight. This is Phil. Until next time.